The story begins with someone lighting a fire in a dark forest at night. Several people decided to drink to some event, because they were glad that it happened. As it turned out, it was a company of young people who were relaxing together and drinking together. We also learn that the main character's name is Zhu Anhao. He is a first-year student at Shanghai University. Today they and their classmates decided to organize a joint camping trip. And for him personally, this is a truly special event, since his beloved girl named Mino is sitting next to him. My classmates gradually began to retreat to their tent, because it was already very dark, and everyone wanted to get some sleep. Teenagers in love passed by their classmates and headed to the tent in which they wanted to spend the night. The joyful guy headed inside with his girlfriend, and hoped for something more than just sleep. Some time later, the entrance to the tent was closed, and the teenagers hid there. All this time, one of their classmates was watching them and smiling sarcastically. Having fastened the entrance to the tent, the guy began to think about what he should do next. Taking off his clothes, he wanted to lie down not far from his girlfriend. Turning to her, Zhu embarrassedly addressed her by the name Nono, because that's what he affectionately called her. Getting ready for bed, the girl also blushed and wanted to find out what the guy wanted from her. Moving closer to her, he hovered over her body and waited. The silent girl continued to lie and look at her beloved. They started kissing, and Anhao decided to ask Nono if he could count on something more. Smiling, the girl only stopped him and wanted to say something. Blushing and a little confused, she said that she should do this next time, because she was very tired today. A moment later, the girl had already turned around and went to bed. Anhao was very sad about this, but still agreed with this outcome of events. Watching his girlfriend, he only thought about what to do next, and what to do in the future when this happens again. Continuing to look at Mino, the hero only hoped that she would change her mind. But unfortunately, this did not happen, and they continued to lie close to each other and began to sleep. Suddenly, Zhu Anhao felt an intense heat, as if there was a fire burning not far from him. Feeling very nervous and anxious, he woke up and was stunned by what was happening. After all, upon waking up, he continued to find that everything around him was burning, and the flames were getting closer every second. Physically, he could even feel that the fire was really not far from him and was burning his hands. Calling his girlfriend, he wanted to get help from her, because he was afraid of burning in this tent. Sitting down and moving away from sleep, Zhu Anhao began to think about what happened. Luckily it was just a nightmare, but somehow it felt like he was actually on fire. To my surprise, looking around, no one was nearby. The excited hero began to think about where his girlfriend was. Looking out of his tent, he immediately saw no one, and continued his search. Walking around the neighborhood, he still did not find his girlfriend, and began to worry even more. Taking out a flashlight from his things, the hero continued his search. I hope that he will find Nono. Walking deeper into the forest, the guy still didn't understand where his girlfriend had gone, because it was already quite late, and something could have happened to her. Suddenly, he heard some rustling not far from him, and soon, someone nearby began to talk about how they should stop. Rejoicing, Anhao immediately guessed that it could be Nona's voice. While scanning the area and looking through the tree, the guy discovered something. What he saw truly shocked him, because he could not have expected it. His girlfriend was hugging one of her classmates, who had previously looked at them and smiled sarcastically. The scoundrel wanted to know from the girl why she decided to run away from her boyfriend in the middle of the night. Was Zhu Anhao really not satisfying her? The selfish girl only said that he was just a fool, and if it weren't for her boyfriend's cute face, she wouldn't have paid attention to him at all. Continuing to listen to this conversation, Anhao was simply amazed at the girl's opinion of him. From shock and anger, the guy stumbled when he stepped back, and a moment later, he began to fall into the abyss, which was not far from him. Continuing to fall, he thought about the fact that he had not had time to come to his senses from the girl's betrayal, as he is already flying down a giant cliff. After some time of free fall, Zhu Anhao still fell onto some flat surface. It turned out that it was a huge yin and yang sign. Gradually coming to his senses, the guy began to open his eyes. And he continued to think that everything could end this way, and perhaps he could die here. Meanwhile, the mysterious guy looked at the bright moon. Sighing heavily with fiery air, he thought about what was burdening him. Because after he helped Lady Nuwa save the heavens, he had to seal himself, and it's hard to say how much time has passed since then. It was sealed in that very plane, which was a huge yin-yang sign. Hearing that someone was making some sounds, the stranger realized that something strange was happening. Then he saw the lifeless Zhu Anhao, who was lying on that very sign. Continuing to watch this guy, the spirit knew that only a person with Zhurong's blood flowing through his veins could destroy the seal. And this boy may be a descendant of the spirit. This guy really fell from a great height, his body was badly damaged and his bones were broken. His spirit understood that the guy really didn't have long to live. Suddenly, the stranger had an idea. And he doesn't have to choose, since his body is destroyed and his spirit is weakening. He thinks that if he leaves his current vessel, the earth will not disappear and the sky will not collapse. Come closer to the guy, the spirit began to ask him to be patient a little, because now all his suffering will pass. By placing his hand, the fire spirit began to act. The main character's body began to gradually become covered in fire, and thus was restored. Absolutely all parts of the body were covered in fire, but the fire did not cause any harm. At that same second, the guy suddenly woke up. There was a very loud scream, because Zhu Anhao did not understand what was happening to him. This scream was truly heard throughout the forest, and every student who was there could hear it. Even Mino, along with the scoundrel who seduced her, heard this. After thinking a little, the girl immediately guessed that it could be her boyfriend, because it sounded like his voice. Continuing to think, the girl began to talk about the possibility that Zhu Anhao found out about her betrayal. Meanwhile, the scoundrel only pressed closer to her and said that it doesn't matter, because they will not part with each other because of such a nonentity as Anhao. Blushing, the girl wanted to know if her new boyfriend was really eager to continue their date. At the same time, in one part of the forest, trees began to ignite, and the rocks that were nearby began to crack. Zhu Anhao rose from the dead, and was alive because he was helped by the fire spirit, who wanted him to live. Suddenly, the main character began to scream incredibly loudly, and his body continued to wrap around the fire, as if consuming it. His arms were also in flames, and wrapped around every part of his body. Even the legs were wrapped in fire, as if they were strengthening it in this way. Treatment by the divine name is really a pleasure, but the pain was simply unbearable. Having met the hero, the spirit told him that he would borrow his body for a short time. Looking at the mountain, the spirit saw that the height was indeed enormous, from which Anhao fell. And he thought that the hero fell because the girl abandoned him, because the height was truly mind-boggling. However, the fire spirit understood that nothing else should be expected from his descendant. But still, this is not the time to indulge in memories, and it is time to act. The fiery spirit decided to perform a maneuver in which he could easily climb this mountain. Jumping with all his might, the spirit now knew that it was his turn, and he will return Anhao back to the scene of events. This was really so, because the same girl with the scoundrel who shot and stood nearby came into his field of vision. They continued to kiss and hug, and the main character looked at all this. Suddenly, Mino noticed him, and was dumbfounded that they were being watched. And this was really so, because the guy was already sitting on the tree and continued to observe everything that was happening. The couple could not even think that someone was watching them. Continuing to observe this situation, the fiery spirit concluded that they were doing this in front of everyone, in the open air, and the two of them, apparently, were really impatient. Angry, the scoundrel shouted that he did not think that Anhao would find them. With incredible ease, the guy jumped from the giant tree, and was safe and sound. He thought that these scoundrels were clenching so loudly because they were afraid of being discovered. The impudent man who seduced his girlfriend said that this was indeed the case. And he just loves watching people like him, losers who discovered their girls cheating on them. The scoundrel was simply drawn to this ridiculous facial expression. Continuing to listen to all this, the girl did not even deny that this madman had fun with her. The scoundrel continued to put pressure on the main character. They say that he won't even be able to hit him, because he doesn't have enough strength to do it. Although the fiery spirit has lived a long time, this is really the first time he has heard such a strange request. If this insolent person insists on it so much, then he can arrange it. A moment later, Zhu Anhao was nowhere to be seen as he jumped high again. The scoundrel could not see him anywhere, although he looked around. Suddenly, his gaze stopped on some object. It turned out that in fact the fire spirit was already behind the impudent one. Turning around, the scoundrel felt that he was being attacked and wanted to dodge the attack. Fortunately, he failed, and the impudent man was punished, because his face was right on the floor. Feeling all the power and strength, the main character decided to act, and saw no reason to refuse to punish the insolent man. The impact on the floor was so strong that the ground nearby collapsed and cracked. The head of the guy who seduced his girlfriend was slammed into the ground and dirt, all because this impudent person himself asked the main character to punch him in the face. Resisting, the scoundrel wanted to get out, and tried with all his might to do so, but he couldn't do it at all, because he seemed to be constrained in his movements. Realizing that he was unable to fight such a strong guy, the scoundrel could not understand who he really was. And then Zhu Anhao made the assumption that the scumbag was possessed by a demon, and a magical ominous aura began to appear around the impudent man. Meanwhile, the villain's hands also began to change their appearance, and he began to have claws. With a hand with claws, he grabbed the guy with all his strength and wanted to resist. The scoundrel really was possessed by a demon, because his appearance changed dramatically. He had horns and incredibly sharp claws. He began to resist strong attacks and wanted to destroy the fire spirit. Continuing to attack, the demon wanted to kill the fire spirit to show his true strength. But fortunately, the hero was also not so easy, and was easily able to avoid the strong attack. The face of a demon appeared before a completely ordinary guy, who wanted to destroy him. Shaking off the dust, the guy began to say that such an ancient clan of demonic spirits had not yet been exterminated. This demon was called Krupnarog, because he had huge horns, and his appearance was like that of a bull. Worried, Mino began screaming that there were monsters near her. Hearing this, the demon could not believe that she was saying this. Getting even more angry, he began to look at the girl, who was crying and very much afraid of him. The demon only said that he was not a monster. Sighing with relief, the girl really felt better. But from the moral trauma she received, she still fell to the floor and lost consciousness. After thinking a little about everything that was happening, the fire spirit concluded that the demons survived simply by moving into the bodies of people. He had never really seen such strange magic before. The demon only ordered him not to play the fool, because he himself is the same as him, a descendant of spirits. The cloven-hoofed creature began to lick its lips, and it was clear that it would like to taste what the spirit of fire tastes like. Hearing that the spirit wanted to eat him, Zhu Anhao just laughed. After all, the fire spirit gave him frantic power, with the help of which no one can defeat the main character. Feeling a surge of energy, the guy began to master the fire technique. And he was ready to fight the arrogant demon who wanted to eat him. Using ancient magical techniques, Zhu Anhao wanted to resist the scoundrel who dared to desecrate his girlfriend and attempt his life. His look was confident, and he was ready to fight to the last, which is why, after such a long sleep, the fiery spirit wanted to eat fried beef. The demon was also ready for battle, and was going to attack his opponent with the help of magical abilities. Experiencing even greater rage, the demon used a technique called steel horns. With great speed, the demon began to attack his opponent, feeling a surge of energy. Ready to strike, Zhu Anhao was about to launch his super strong strike using fire magic. Then he struck a blow called an incinerating blow. A powerful attack was made directly to the villain's head, and thus he flew up from the attack. When the insolent body flew over the surface of the earth, it seemed that he was already defeated, because he did not move at all. The fearless guy wanted to continue fighting, because he was ready to do it to the last. With the help of an incredibly powerful attack and the explosion that occurred because of it, the demon continued his free fall. As a result, he hit with all his might straight into a tree that stood nearby. It seemed that the demon was unconscious, because he began to fall to the ground, and could no longer do anything. Watching everything that was happening, Zhu Anhao was happy with this outcome of events. At the same time, the fire spirit understood that the human body was not so easy to control, even if it were his real body. Then with this blow he would have burned this entire forest on this mountain to the very foundation. Meanwhile, the demon began to turn into a human again because it was defeated. Because of just one blow, the scoundrel turned back into a man, and the main character believed that because of this he was a weakling. And since he is related to the demon clan, then there is no other choice but to kill him. Suddenly, the demon began to be consumed, because it did not want to be killed. It was a truly strange sight, because some unknown creature began to appear in space. As it turned out, it was a small demon who did not immediately see the greatness of the fire spirit, and begged him to be lenient and not kill him. After listening to the little demon, the hero silently looked at him and thought about what he should do next. Nevertheless, the fiery spirit decided to grab it on wheels and finish its job. This small creature had just taken possession of a man's body, but now the hero did not feel that former, evil spirit. Then the demon explained that he was not from the clan of demonic spirits, but an ordinary demon stuck. Hearing that such spirits existed, the spirit of fire realized that he had been asleep for too long if he did not know about the existence of such spirits. The spirit continued to say that most likely the fire spirit is the oldest, and it is not surprising that he does not know about it. Earlier, 1,000 years ago, something happened. Namely, a mysterious disaster that affected the whole world. It was this catastrophe that led the clans of gods and demons of this world to complete extermination. However, their souls were able to survive this tragedy. They had no other choice, they settled in the bodies of descendants in whose veins the blood of their clans flowed. Each of the spirits could understand who his descendant was in order to move into this person. This symbiosis made it possible to use the power of spirit, because of which it began to be called obsession. After listening to this story, the fire spirit was dumbfounded by this. And with regret he realized that his real body had long since decayed. Realizing that everything is not so simple, the spirit also remembered Nueva, thinking that maybe she was dead too. Meanwhile, the spirit stuck began to make excuses and cry, saying that he had never harmed people. He literally begged to forgive him, but something told the fiery spirit that he was being lied to, because it was this spirit that had recently tried to eat him. It turned out that the spirit just wanted to taste Zhu Anhao's spiritual power in order to become stronger, and it is intangible, so it could not eat a person. This argument really influenced the protagonist's decision, and he let the spirit go, but still he decided not to leave him unpunished, and prepared for the attack. Using his finger, he hit it with all his might and threw the impudent spirit far away. The weakened spirit fell to the floor and felt defeated. Zhu Anhao, in turn, said that he is not the god of death, so he will not kill this spirit. But if he rocks the boat again, you should know that they will make a shish kebab out of him. Prilipala bowed and said that he would never do this to people again. He still cannot avoid punishment, because it would be unfair, and since the fiery spirit now shares this body with the guy, the stick must help him take out all the accumulated anger. Events continued to occur the next morning at the camp. The sleepy protagonist gradually began his awakening. Yawning heavily, he thought that he really had a dream about a very strange cat, and his whole body was aching. The body ached as if it had been rolled over. Suddenly, it really dawned on him. Looking at himself, he realized that yesterday he had fallen off a cliff, and did not understand how it happened that he ended up here unharmed. Suddenly, the guy heard someone asking him why he had been so noisy since the morning. The worried hero decided to turn around to check who was talking to him. To his surprise, he saw some unknown creature flying behind him. Out of fear and surprise, the guy began to scream with all his might, because he did not suspect that some creature was flying behind him. The fiery spirit, in turn, shouted that the guy was a brat, because he was his vessel, and could not be afraid of such a small spirit. The stunned boy began to cry and shouted that the demon wanted to finish him off. The spirit only ordered him to apologize, because he was inflamed with anger. Having calmed down a little, Zhu Anhao still realized that in front of him was the god of fire Jerome. And then he realized with surprise that yesterday's event was not a dream. The fire spirit also did not deny this, and replied that this was indeed not a dream. After all, everything was exactly as the guy remembered, because when he jumped from the mountain, his body acquired terrible damage that did not give him a chance to survive. That is why the fire god Zhu decided to take possession of his body and, with the help of reviving fire, save his soul. Continuing to listen to this whole story, the guy still couldn't believe it, and in surprise he poked his finger at the god of fire, amazed at his appearance. This outcome really made the hero laugh, because he was saved by some kind of fireball. These words did not please the god of fire even more, because he is not a ball, and the powerful being ordered the ordinary person to apologize. Meanwhile, someone was running towards the tent with incredible speed. Having reached the tent closer, the stranger began to move the entrance. And then he started screaming that something bad had happened. The stranger started shouting that something had happened to Mina and Wen Moshwan. Once again very surprised, the main character did not understand what to do in this situation, and what exactly happened to his girlfriend. Many students began to emerge from their tents to see what had happened. Some girls were amazed at what shameful acts were committed in this forest. Other students wanted to photograph what was happening here, because they believed that it would be a sensation. At the same time, having changed clothes, Zhu Anhao, together with the god of fire, decided to hit the road to find out what happened there. After all, He was really interested in what could have happened to his girlfriend. Laughing, the side of the fire only said that the guy should hurry up and see everything for himself. A huge number of people did not stand near the scene of the incident, and only looked at what was happening. Watching everything that was happening, the main character also began to wonder where such a crowd of people came from. But raising his head up, it suddenly dawned on him, and he was extremely surprised by what he saw above. His girlfriend was hanging from the tree, as well as the guy she cheated on him with. Due to the fact that they were hanging quite high, the scoundrels could not get down from the tree. The guy his girlfriend cheated on with was unconscious and thus couldn't come downstairs. Mina was also hanging on a branch, and could not do anything about it. The event was truly a sensation and their photos were all over social media. The photographs were published because this event really stunned everyone present in this forest who saw such reprisals against the traitors. The published photo on social networks received a huge number of likes, and all people actively discussed what was happening. Zhu Anhao could not understand how this happened, because only a couple of hours had passed since the photo was published, and it had already received tens of thousands of likes. At the same time, the god of fire was watching the guy rummaging through his phone. This device truly surprised him, because he had never seen anything like this before. Because the fire god Zhu was in hibernation all the time, he believed that this mobile phone was a real miracle, and he was curious about what secrets it was hiding. The main character did not really like this obsessive behavior, and he again poked God in the face. Continuing to think about everything that was happening, Zhu wanted to understand how long this guy would follow him. This kind of behavior is indeed very evil for the fire god, because he was the savior of an ordinary person, and wanted to be treated accordingly. The main character was angry with God because he believed that in this way Mina would definitely leave him for what he did to her. People who were standing nearby heard this argument and paid attention to what was happening. In the guy who was screaming, they recognized the young man who hung his girlfriend on a tree because she cheated on him, and due to the fact that ordinary people did not see God, they believed that this guy was talking to himself, as if he had gone crazy. Meanwhile, God's pursuit of an ordinary person continued, and the guy quickly wanted to run away from him. Fire god Zhu was incredibly fast, and was easily able to catch up with the person he was trying so hard to save. This behavior was truly unacceptable for him, and he did not understand why the guy was behaving this way. The embittered spirit began to shout that no one dares to ignore him, because he is the mighty one. Zhu Anhao was not impressed by this argument, and he only looked at his savior with regret. And soon, pointing his finger at him, he said that if he is the god of fire, Zhu, then he will be God Pangu, who created the whole world. The troubled guy also ordered God not to follow him every time. Hearing this, the fire god Zhu did not understand why man reacted to his kindness this way, because it's impossible to understand how a normal guy can't crave his power. There are many unusual people in this world who know how to use the power of demons and gods. Even yesterday's weak bighorn could easily tear it to shreds. Unfortunately, Zhu Anhao did not believe it, and still did not want to receive help from the fire god in the future. Because the guy believed that they live in a legal society, and such dangers cannot arise anywhere. Even if there is some kind of threat, there is always a possibility that a hero will appear at that very moment. Anhao just wanted the quiet life of an ordinary person and nothing more. Suddenly, the guy discovered something. It was a women's dormitory, part of which was covered in fire. Several floors were on fire, although girls lived in them. Concerned students wanted to understand when this building managed to catch fire. Suddenly, one of the girls who were standing in the company realized that her friend was inside the dorm. The girl literally began to beg everyone present to help save her. But ordinary students could not do anything about it, because they did not know how to help her friend now. Continuing to beg, the girl began to approach absolutely all the students, but no one wanted to help her. All this time, the fire god Zhu watched what was happening, and the poor girl, who did not know what to do. And unfortunately, the very hero who could help in this situation was really nowhere to be seen, and among them there was only a bunch of selfish people. This is truly something that has not changed even in the 1000 years that God has been absent. So no one decided to help the girl. She sat down on the floor and began to sob. Clenching his fist, the main character decided to act and began to think through a plan with which he could help the very girl who was in danger. Approaching one of the students, he asked her to borrow water. Snatching the bottle of water from the girl's hands, the guy immediately began to run towards the hostel. although he did not know what kind of god was flying not far from him. But no one ever dares to underestimate humanity. These words truly surprised God, because he could not believe that an ordinary person would be ready to save a stranger. After splashing the water on his head and clothes, Zhu Anhao was ready to act. With great speed, he began to run towards the entrance to the dormitory to help the innocent student. Previously, the hero always considered himself a weak person. When he walked down the street, he did not dare to help other people. Because I tried once again not to meddle in other people's affairs, and also tried to avoid exposing himself to attack as much as possible. He always ignored situations in which he could at least somehow help. To the point of knowing about the affair between Mina and Wen Mashuan. I tried my best to ignore it because I was so afraid of losing my girlfriend. But his patience ran out, because he no longer wanted to be treated like that. Deciding to act, he began to make his way through the crowd of people and rushed to the entrance. The students were filming him with a mobile phone camera all this time, and thought that perhaps it was his girlfriend who was locked in the dormitory. One of the students finally realized that this was the same guy who hung his girlfriend and the guy with whom she cheated on a tree. Meanwhile, some stranger continued to watch Zhu Anhao run towards the entrance, and she considered such a brave guy an extremely annoying young man, and the fact that he ran to save the girl began to irritate her. Despite the smoke, the hero continued to make his way to the floor where the fire started. With every second he was getting closer and closer to the scene of the incident. Finding himself in the ignited corridor, he began to look for that very room. Having quickly found her, the hero reached for the door handle to open it and save the innocent lady. When I touched the doorknob, it was unbearable to hold because it was so hot. Overcoming the pain, the guy again began to try to open the door, but unfortunately, it was closed. The excited guy wanted to understand why this was so, and why there was a need to close the door in such a situation. Due to the fact that he failed to save the girl, he still could not understand why nothing was working out in his life. And then he decided to hit the door with all his might because he was furious. Meanwhile, firefighters began to arrive at the hostel. Several fire engines arrived at the scene and began a rescue operation. The desperate guy was watched all this time by the fire god Zhu, who decided to help him. Feeling strong self-hatred, the hero decided to take this action and asked God to use his body like yesterday, but save the people who were in this room. God did not like this request, and he began to shake his head. And he said that human souls are too weak. If he puts all his faces into him a couple more times, then he is afraid that his soul will simply evaporate. Therefore, it is better to take advantage of the power of the fire god Zhu, which he can give to an ordinary person. A moment later, the main character began to feel a surge of power, and he was surrounded by flames. The god of fire decided to give him superhuman strength to help him save people who were in danger. Thus, Zhu Anhao began to possess the same abilities that the fire god possesses. His hands were wrapped in flames, but he felt no pain at all, and could control the magic of fire. Having become one with God, the main character decided to knock down the door in order to save the girl. From a strong blow, something began to fall from the window. The stunned firefighters pulled the cloth onto which they wanted to catch what was falling. A few seconds later, the object fell directly onto this fabric. Surprisingly, it was the front door with a huge hole in it. I don't understand anything. The firefighters watched this object and could not understand how it ended up here. And all this happened because Zhu Anhao had superhuman strength and could easily knock down any door. Looking around, fortunately, he did not have to look for the girl for long, and he immediately found her. Even though she was unconscious, she was still breathing and alive. This girl's name must have been Simo, because this was the name that her neighbor said, who was very worried. No one could have thought that she would turn out to be such a cutie, and with such a figure. Suddenly, the girl began to regain consciousness and said that she felt very bad. Opening her eyes, she immediately saw a stranger in front of her, staring at her. Blushing, the student began shouting who he was and what he was doing here, because she considered him an ordinary pervert. But in reality, this guy only wanted to save her from the fire. Seeing what happened in her room, the lady could not understand how it happened. The building gradually began to collapse from damage due to the fire, and a huge cabinet began to fall directly on top of the student. Fearing that this cabinet would fall right on her, the girl began to cover her head in fear. Fortunately, having reacted in time, the hero was easily able to push the cabinet away so that it would not hit the girl. At that very second, he decided to use his acquired abilities and began to use fire magic. His hands began to glow with a fiery flame, and he decided to hit this cabinet and destroy it. With just one blow, the cabinet shattered into small pieces because superhuman force was used. The girl's surprise knew no bounds, and she could not believe that they had really come to save her. Smiling, the guy turned to the girl and asked if she believed him now. Feeling even more surprised, the girl noticed that her savior was burning. There was nothing in this world that could burn him, Zhu Anhao said. Deciding to continue saving the girl, the main character took her in his arms. And he really didn't think that in this life he would have the role of a hero saving a real beauty. Having passed, which was made of a flying door, together they decided to jump off the building. Without stopping, firefighters continued to extinguish the fire that broke out in the building. Suddenly, one of the firefighters saw that there was some movement on one of the floors. It was Zhu Anhao who saved the student from the burning building. The frightened girl screamed that she did not want to jump from such a gigantic height. They had no other choice, so they were going to jump together with the guy. Although the height was enormous, the firefighters pulled on a fabric that would soften the fall and they would not get hurt. Thus, possessing superhuman strength, the main character decided to jump and thus saved the student from the burning building. Jumping onto the fabric, he tried with all his might to protect the girl so that she would not damage anything when she fell. It was all over now, because they were safe now. As it turned out, the student lost consciousness from shock during the jump. Doctors immediately took her in to examine her and help her recover from her injuries. At the same time, God began to emerge from an ordinary person, who freed him. The god of fire came out of the body of an ordinary mortal, because he helped him do a good deed. Although only a small part of his strength was used, even this result was quite good. Zhu Anhao had the feeling that his character had changed significantly. It turned out that this was all because his soul and body were too weak, they were slightly influenced by the fire god. A moment later, a friend of the injured girl came up and thanked the guy with all her heart for saving her friend. Because if it weren't for him, Xiaoxi would already be dead. Feeling a little awkward, the student explained that they were still studying at the same university, and he could not do otherwise. The friend's name was Tang Ling, and she wanted to thank him properly, but now she had to go to the hospital to see her neighbor. Hurrying, the girl headed to the ambulance to be with her rescued friend. Turning around, the girl looked at the main character very strangely and sarcastically. Although he didn't see anything wrong with it, the fire god immediately noticed that this girl had hidden anger. Then the young man decided to ask the god of fire what he really meant. In turn, the ancient spirit sensed an evil aura in the room of the girl who was saved. Suddenly, the heroes immediately realized that Gong Simo might also be possessed by a demon. But in fact, the god of fire meant her friend. If he is not mistaken, then it is she who is possessed by a demonic spirit, most likely the spirit of the demon of envy. It turned out that the main character often came across the name of this demon in the books he had previously read. The god of fire, in turn, asked him not to invent it, because it is impossible that information about the myriad of spirits, demons, and gods of the heavenly world could appear in human books. The only place where you could find out about them was the Encyclopedia of Monsters written by Baijie. This book contains information about all 11,520 spirits, demons and gods. Hearing this, the enterprising guy immediately decided to buy it in order to learn about each of the creatures. This proposal really angered the fire god, because the Encyclopedia of Evil Spirits is an ancient book and cannot be bought with money. This is because this book was lost long ago and is considered a priceless treasure. Suddenly, at that very second, Zhu Anhao stepped on some book that was lying on the ground. The guy behind him turned to him and asked him not to trample on his book. Overcoming awkwardness, the hero began to say that he really apologized wildly and was ready to buy it. Out of interest, he decided to open this book to see its contents. And then he decided to pay attention to exactly what this book was called. As it turned out, this book was called the Baijie Encyclopedia of Evil Spirits. Such a book can now be purchased for only 10 yuan, and you can also pay for its cost via a QR code. Sensing the unusual aura, the fire god immediately realized that there was something wrong with it, and this guy was Baijie. The surprised deity was also amazed that she met with Mr. Zhurong. After all, they had not seen each other for a long time. Zhurong immediately realized that Baijie was still the same unbearable god. The fire god was also surprised as to why this brat did not become a spirit. Looking through this guy, he realized that modern life did not cause him any difficulties, and Jerome wanted to understand what the secret was. It turned out that 1,000 years ago, a great catastrophe led to the fact that most of the demons and gods turned into spirits, but some lucky ones managed to survive, and he was just one of them. Meanwhile, the guy continued to watch the two deities communicating with each other. He was stunned that the legendary Baijia looked like this. Baijia is an ancient god who has existed since the creation of the world, by the way. Then he looked exactly the same, only the god of fire could not imagine that a majestic deity would descend to such a pitiful merchant. Even though Baijia is an ancient god, he still wants to eat, and with his financial success one can't count on much, so he trades here. He also sometimes streams for donations. Even now, he turned on the stream to greet his audience and ask them to subscribe. On the stream, everyone thought he was a very cute boy, some girls even wanted to take him home and cuddle him. The embittered Jurong now believed that he was thus dishonoring the family of gods. At the same time, the boy was reading an encyclopedia of evil spirits and looking for information about the demon of envy. After a short search, he finally found information about this demon. The puzzled heroes decided to look at the book to see what was written there about this demon. Unfortunately, what they saw shocked them, because the demon of envy looked like an ordinary bird, and it was like a joke. Baijia didn't know how to draw much, but this way the content looked more important than the colorful picture. The demon of envy inclines people to envy. Using this feeling as food, the objects of envy chosen by the demon will soon die due to the misfortunes it caused. And this meant that that girl had really been possessed by a demon. Then the girl they saved was in great danger. The student went to the hospital, and perhaps her friend plans to finish what she started, which is why the heroes must stop her, and it is necessary to immediately go to the hospital. Suddenly, nearby, someone started screaming loudly and calling for the main character. The guy immediately recognized his old friend by his voice. The joyful boy jumped on Zhu Anhao, almost knocking him down. This behavior was indeed very strange, and the god of fire was amazed at what was happening. It was Xiaoqing, whom Zhu Anhao asked many times not to jump so unexpectedly. The flirtatious boy only laughed at such a request, because he believed that they were brothers and such behavior was permissible. Continuing to be indignant, the god of fire decided to ask who this guy was and why he had such large pectoral muscles. It turned out that this is Xiaoqing. Since childhood she has played the role of his older brother, and she is also a girl. This outcome struck Jerome even more, and here he stood in bewilderment and waited for what would happen next. Xiaoqing came here so quickly because she heard that Zhu Anhao's girlfriend left him again, and her best friend now needs to console him. In fact, the entire university already knew that they had broken up. The stunned hero jumped with anger and asked the girl not to continue talking about it. His friend, in turn, continued to support him, saying that when sadness tears you apart, it's worth running just 300 districts along the running field. And then, immediately, all your sorrows will be forgotten instantly. Unfortunately, Zhu Anhao knew that he could not do this, because he had never boasted of his monstrous endurance. Listening to Xiaoqing, the fire god liked her words, because her attitude really did not leave him indifferent. Feeling that God was not supporting him, Zhu became angry with him and ordered him not to play along. Xiaoqing, in turn, heard that her comrade was talking to someone, and asked who he was talking to. Justifying himself, the guy only said that he was just communicating with himself, and there was nothing wrong with it. Due to the fact that he still had something to do, he decided to run away, and shouted that they could chat next time, after which he said goodbye. At the same time, the god of fire tried with all his might to catch up with the fast boy, and he also flew after him with incredible speed in order to be nearby. Watching her comrade, Xiaoqing immediately realized that it seemed that everything was fine with this blockhead. The girl still felt very cheerful, so during training she was ready to run right up to sunset. Some time later, events continued to occur in the hospital. The main character, together with the god of fire, approached the entrance to the hospital room and thought about the fact that Simo should be here. Zhurong also encouraged him and asked him to quickly enter in order to save her and protect her. In fact, the guy was not particularly good at communicating with girls, especially such beautiful ones, which is why he asked the fire god to help him with this. It turned out that her roommate was already in the ward and talking with the girl. The girl pretended that she was very happy, because Simo was safe and sound. Then she decided to hold out a cup with some liquid and asked her to drink a little. Simo, in turn, was very grateful to her friend, and was glad that she was here. At that same second, Zhu Anhao opened the door and was about to enter the room. The joyful hero shouted that he had come to visit Simo, and then he turned to his friend and asked her to leave them alone, because the guy needed to discuss something with Simo. This was okay for me, because the girl still planned to resolve the issue of a dorm room, so she was going to visit her neighbor tomorrow. Having said goodbye, the girl nevertheless left the room, leaving them alone. This behavior really shocked Zhu Anhao, and he realized that this girl must be from the acting department. Not understanding anything, Simo wanted to find out what the guy meant. Then the hero decided to tell him that the so-called girlfriend is not really who she claims to be. And she, in turn, is a merciless arsonist. Hearing these words, Simo immediately realized that her friend could indeed be involved in this. But still the girl did not want to believe it, and ordered the guy to shut up, because she believed that her best friend could not do this to her. That is why the upset girl ordered Anhao to give her the opportunity to rest. There was one thing that Zhu Anhao still decided to do. This young man decided to steal the girl's tea. This really made her angry, because Simo really hoped to drink it, although the guy's throat was a little dry, which is why he took it. Without hesitation, he decided to act and immediately drank the liquid that was in the mug. And then, as if nothing had happened, he began to leave, wishing the girl a speedy recovery. The door slammed and the student began to leave the hospital. Meanwhile, Simo continued to think that the guy who visited her was really very strange. At the same time, Zhu Anhao, walking along the corridor to the hospital, thought that the girl was really very stupid, because if it weren't for him, she would have already died several times. Suddenly, he spat out something unknown. It was some kind of strange ball that was in the tea. In fact, it was an unknown insect that began to try to move directly onto the palm. There was really something wrong with the tea, but the hero drank it because he guessed right away. This insect was an underwater leech. It hides in the water. If it is swallowed, the flesh begins to fester and become covered with ulcers, changing the person beyond recognition. The victim will happily choose death instead of such a life. Realizing all this, Anhao decided that she could not be allowed to succeed. The experienced fire god immediately realized that the guy liked Simo so much that he decided to save her, like some kind of hero. If she didn't have such an appearance, he really wouldn't have decided to get into such a mess with his character. The guy, in turn, insisted that this was not entirely true, but God understood that if he denies this, then he is denying it, and if he refuses, then he is right, and since he is right, then the guy is lying. The surprised hero, in turn, did not understand where God had picked up such phrases. It turned out that all this time the student had heard this entire conversation, and considered Anhao a very problematic guy. Some time later, night fell and events continued to occur in the hospital. The corridors of the hospital were absolutely empty, and there was not a single visitor. Only someone in a skirt decided to sneak into one of the chambers to do something terrible. The door gradually began to swing open, revealing light from the hallway. And in the resulting shadow one could see the silhouette of a girl who entered Simo's room. This was the same friend who was surprised and admired Simo, because she does not burn in fire, and is not afraid of poison. Nothing can take her. But the girl came up with a lot of ways to end her. Besides, I can't wait to play with Simo's cute face. That's why she wanted to commit a terrible crime now, and play with her neighbor's face, because she was possessed by the demon of envy. Suddenly, strange events began to happen, and the girl jumped out of her hospital bed. She literally grabbed the hand of her attacking neighbor and stopped her. This outcome was truly surprising, and Lin was dumbfounded. Unexpectedly, she exclaimed that it was again the one she had already seen. Namely, Zhu Anhao, who stood in her way, was disguised in the same way as Simo looked. The girl's hand immediately trembled, and she removed it. And then she started screaming because she wanted to find out where her real friend was. At that very second, the girl exclaimed that she was here. Simo was indeed in the ward all this time, and saw what was happening here. Turning around, the scoundrel saw how her friend was dumbfounded by everything that was happening. The lady began to cry, because she believed that they were best friends, and there was no need to do this to her. A student possessed by a demon screamed that they couldn't be best friends because they constantly quarreled over boys. Although the girl didn't want to believe him until the very end, she learned something else. Previously, the doctor told her that components of a sleeping pill were found in the blood, and the doctor wanted to find out whether the girl was taking sedatives. Surprisingly, Simo knew that she had never taken anything like that, because she was fine with sleep. Realizing all this and continuing to cry, the girl only wanted to know why her friend wanted her to die so badly. Laughing, the friend only said that she never wanted to kill her, but I just wanted to disfigure her face to see how she would steal other people's guys. Previously, she and Jeming had always been a wonderful and loving couple. The girl even loved him so much that she gave up her innocence, and thought that they would be together until the grave. One day, a student received a message from her boyfriend. In these messages, he said that he had fallen in love with Simo, and begged Lin to forgive him, because he believed that this was normal and feelings could pass. This event was truly an incredible shock for the student, and she did not know what to do next. When the girl had a strong moral shock, a mysterious bird flew straight to her window. This bird was really very strange, because it had many red eyes. All these eyes were directed directly at the girl, and watched her carefully. Simo started making excuses, saying that she really didn't know things would turn out this way, and apologized to her friend. This was not enough, and Lin began to use her ability called spiritification. With the help of this ability, the girl began to turn into an unknown creature. Her hands were transformed into huge paws with 3 fingers, and dark wings began to appear on his back, growing larger with each passing second. Thus, Lin began to turn into that very demon of envy. The stunned friend temporarily watched Lin all this time and could not understand how this was possible. Although the girl herself did not care how, she was still going to destroy Simo. Having raised the girl, she decided to take revenge and punish her. Flying out of the window, Lin lifted her over many houses, and probably wanted to throw her off. Feeling very afraid, Simo wanted to understand what Lin wanted to do with her. The embittered and demon-possessed girl only watched her victim and wanted to commit a terrible act. In an instant, she decided to let go of her friend, with whom she had been friends and lived together for many years. Simo was in free fall and thought she was done for. With every second, moments from the life that she had previously lived passed before her eyes. Continuing to scream, she hoped that she would somehow be able to survive this situation. The possessed student just laughed and enjoyed the sight of her ex-friend falling from a great height. Suddenly, the girl saw fiery wings that were not far from her. She didn't like what she saw very much, because her plan was ruined. Because this annoying brat saved Simo again, and she remained alive. All because Zhu Anhao did not want a person to die in front of his eyes, because it would be a shame for him. He also couldn't imagine that the girl would be so heavy, so he asked her to lose weight. This behavior was unacceptable to Simo, and she considered this guy to be incredibly rude. Continuing to watch the hero, Lin did not understand where this scoundrel came from, because he always ruins her plans. Smiling, the boy thought of something. Turning to the god of fire, he said that Lin called him a scoundrel. The god of fire, in turn, could not allow such an attitude towards him, which is why he decided to take revenge. This stupid chicken really should be fried until crispy, Zhurong shouted. The possessed girl began to say that earlier she had planned to first deal with the girl, and then settle scores with him. But since he himself is looking for death, then it's even better for her, and there will be less Maroka, so she used an attack called Feather Blades. Using his incredible divine agility, Zhu Anhao easily dodged this attack. Overcoming obstacles, he made his way to Lin with every second in order to deliver a crushing blow. All this time, Zhurong was watching the girl and drawing conclusions about her transformation. God immediately realized that this girl had evolved so much that apparently the demon inside her had killed many people. But they don't have time to be surprised. This girl is floating in the air, and all they can do is dodge her attacks. Fortunately, the fire god had the art of air bending. Although this is not a particularly strong skill, it would be just right for an ant like him. Using this technique, spiritual energy enveloped Zhu Anhao, his muscles became lighter and more agile. With the help of this technique, it was actually possible to take off and fly several hundred meters up. But when the flight ended, the hero found himself at a great height. This spell's effect really amazed him, but it had one drawback. Namely, that after the jump he will definitely fall to the ground. From such a fall, the main character broke the asphalt with his head and did not move for some time. Fortunately, everything was fine with him, but the magic of air subjugation did not work well, because he is only human. And if a guy wants to have the power of the god of fire, then he needs to train a lot more. Lin, possessed by the demon of envy, only laughed, because it seems that their spiritification was not going entirely smoothly. The heroes did not like the conclusion of this impudent demon, and they decided to act. The evil demon wanted to take away the fire god, thinking that he was a spirit, and fill his belly with him. Thinking about what to do, the guy stood rooted to the spot and did not move. Realizing that he needed to act, he gathered all his power and strength that God gave him. And when they began to use it, the force was visible to the naked eye, because many were covered in fire. With the help of divine dexterity, I managed to dodge the powerful attack of the demon of envy. It was a miracle that he managed to dodge such an attack. But fortunately, the villain was unable to hit the main character with her shot. The demon got even angrier, because he realized that this guy had very little strength, but he dodged well. Meanwhile, Zhurong understood that this guy was very quickly able to master various ways to use flames in battle, and perhaps he was really wrong about him, and this man was a real talent. For Zhu Wanhao, a person who has been bullied since childhood, it is only natural for him to be able to understand various escape techniques. Hearing this answer, the demon decided to test it and see how he could use this talent. Using an even stronger attack, many daggers with magical properties were launched into the distance. The magical daggers aimed to hit their target, namely Simo, who was defenseless and could not dodge so skillfully. Out of fear, the girl began to cover herself with her hands, in the hope that she would be able to avoid the blow. Suddenly, the hero began to talk about how if he met a girl, he would definitely be damn unlucky. And he said this because Simo was saved, because the guy protected her with his own body. Smiling at the girl, he hoped that he would receive gratitude for the rescue. Continuing to cry, the lady blushed and was amazed at the heroism and sacrifice that Zhu Anhao had made. The demon of envy, in turn, considered the guy pathetic, because he sacrificed his life for the sake of a stranger, and this is very low. Meanwhile, the fire god really didn't like that there were people who called ordinary care a pitiful sight. Rising from the floor, the main character called the demon pathetic, because he must have never felt cared for in his life. Feeling very angry, the demon shouted that he was not pitiful, and for such an insult, he is ready to tear the guy to shreds. Using demonic powers, the demon began to get closer every second in order to deliver a fatal attack. Unexpectedly, the guy realized something for himself, because if the enemy cannot be reached in close combat, then you can use a ranged attack, and he began to create a huge fireball. This was all in order to resort to long-range attacks and hit the target with a huge fireball. Not expecting that the enemy was capable of this, the demon did not know how to react to such an attack. With just one shot, the target was hit, and the fireball hit the insolent demon directly. Feeling severe pain, the girl, who had a demon in her body, screamed in pain, because she was frantic. The flames were fatal to her, and tears began to roll down her face, and the demon realized that this guy was not a demon. This conclusion made the main character smile. Continuing the fight, he jumped with all his strength in order to deliver a crushing fire attack. Using the fire strike technique, he swung directly at the demon of envy, and thus wanted to take his life. Feeling helpless, the demon could only watch as this attack took place. Afterwards, the main character only shouted that no one told the demon that Zhu Wanhao was a demon. From the force of the fiery attack, the demon of envy was defeated, and he began to fall to the ground. In free fall, his body slowly burned, because the magical properties of the blow were capable of destroying the body of this scoundrel. After just one crushing blow, the arrogant and malicious demon was crushed. And yet, the impudent man did not understand why this happened, and also why he was so unlucky to meet Zhu Wanhao, and the divine spirit that was in his body. Zhu Wanhao continued to use divine power, and wanted to complete what he started, because it was necessary to drive out the demon of envy from the girl. Now this scoundrel should be sorry in hell, but before that, Zhu Wanhao wanted to give him a good beating. That is why he continued to make attack after attack in order to finally destroy the demon. Suddenly, the demon asked him to stop, because he wanted to say something. He said that if the demon is destroyed, the possessed person will also die after him. With an arrogant look, the guy only said that he didn't like people that much. Smiling, the hero decided to add that he simply hates people. He does not hate those people who dare to threaten him. From the powerful attack, the demon of envy began to roll along the asphalt, and behind him was a huge trail, which was provoked by incredible power. Suddenly, someone decided to stop Zhu Wanhao. It was Simo who asked the hero not to hit the girl. If this fight continues further, then the demon of envy will definitely die in this fight. And there is nothing left but to leave the body of this girl. Then he decided to make it free from the spirit, and free Lin. Although this harmed his further development, he simply had no way out, because the demon of envy could die. Trying to stop the demon, the hero shouted after him so that he would not leave. The insolent demon fled the crime scene and shouted that he would remember this sooner or later. Because the demon of envy can take possession of another person and use him as a vessel. That is why he took possession of the body of a young man who was much stronger. This young man approached the couple directly and wanted to continue this fight. Fearing what was about to happen, the couple watched the stranger, and did not even guess what he wanted to do. Stretching out his hand, the stranger took out something unknown and said that this soul was now his. The main character really didn't like this, and he immediately approached the stranger. Anhao then began to shout that he wanted to know who this guy was and how he dared to appropriate other people's loot. As it turned out, with the current power of the protagonist, he would not even be able to pursue the demon of envy. Therefore, instead of letting him escape, he had to destroy it, and rid this world of such demons. Feeling very angry because of the lost prey, the hero believed that since he had no chance of dealing with that stupid chicken, then he thought it was worth giving him a good beating in order to let off some steam. The stranger, in turn, believed that if the guy was eager to fight, then he wouldn't mind. But the level of his connection with the guardian spirit is too low. And after such a grueling battle, he is afraid that something terrible will happen. Not understanding what was happening, the hero began to lose consciousness. As it turned out, because he fought so recklessly, excessively consuming the power of spiritification, the fiery energy in his body began to circulate randomly, gradually bringing his end closer. Frightened Simo begged the stranger to explain to her in understandable language. To put it simply, he now feels like he has a high fever, an incredibly high temperature. And if this continues, at best his consciousness will suffer, and at worst he will simply die. Spiritual energy was raging in the protagonist's body. This is not a case that an ordinary doctor can handle, and even if the doctor could help him, who by the time he came here, Zhu Anhao might turn to dust. The puzzled girl wanted to ask the stranger what they should do, because they couldn't just let him die. There was still a way to help him, and they were able to do it. It is believed that just as darkness can eclipse the light, so light can dispel darkness. The fire energy attribute in his body relates to light. If they balance it with the corresponding darkness attribute energy, then there is a high probability of achieving harmony between the attributes of light and darkness, which will help stabilize him. Continuing to panic, the girl believed that there were too many incomprehensible letters in his expressions, and she should simply say what needed to be done. In fact, everything was quite simple, and it is necessary to do this procedure mouth to mouth. It is to transfer your energy of darkness of the feminine principle to Zhu Anhao through the mouth. Due to the fact that Anhao had little time left, Simo had very little time to think. Overcoming severe embarrassment, she thought about what to do in this situation. Reaching out her hand to the hero's cheek, she decided to take action, and she thought that this would be a sign of gratitude for saving her. Bending towards the lips of the protagonist, she began to transmit the dark energy of her feminine principle through his mouth. This procedure gave an immediate effect, and the hero began to come to his senses. Having become even more active, he extended his hand and began to hold the girl's head in order to fully kiss her. Pushing away from the guy, Simo called him a pervert and didn't want to kiss him anymore. In turn, the heroes decided to make excuses, saying that Zhurong controlled him, and he could not control his actions. In fact, this was indeed the case, and Zhurong accepted Shimo's dark energy as food. The god of fire exclaimed that the girls should rejoice at such an honor. Suddenly, the girl saw the god of fire in front of her, and thought he was a ghost. She began to scream in horror, because she had never seen anything like this, and Zhuzhong was extremely outraged that he was considered a ghost. Apparently, when the girl transmitted the energy of darkness, her own spiritual energy awakened, which is why she was able to see the spirit. The stranger approached Zhurong, saying that his energy was too strong for an ordinary person. Greatly surprised, God did not understand how the stranger knew him. This was truly an amazing event, because in this period of time it is truly rare to meet an ancient deity, said the stranger. Taking off his mask, the stranger introduced himself. His name was Xingtian. This was the enemy of the emperor, whose head was cut off, but Xingtian did not die, making a mouth from the navel on his body, and eyes from the rest of the body. Seeing that the girl had lost consciousness, Xingtian suggested taking her away from here and then talking about everything else. After all, when they leave here, they can calmly talk in his house. Coming home, and not at the bees, discuss that there are many ways to find a vessel for merging with the spirit. One of them is to search for a descendant who is blood related to the spirit, and the other is to take possession of a person through the weakness of his character. However, all this time, Xingtian existed inside a man named Xing Xiaoyu, and slept soundly until his head mysteriously disappeared, at which time he woke up to find that he had gained complete control over his body. Hearing this, the heroes remembered that earlier he had actually heard about crazy rumors about a killer beheading his victims, and did not think that it would be true. The god of fire, in turn, believed that this was a wonderful event, because the carrier of the body had already died, which means that Xingtian could completely control it for his own purposes. Zhuzhong is forced to be crowded into the same body with this dunce, and can't do anything about it. Although the body remains a body, if he finds Xing Xiaoyu's head and does not resurrect him, then this body will simply turn into a mountain of useless rotten meat. Not to mention that Xingtian will not be able to help but control. Suddenly, they discovered Simo, who was peeking around the corner, watching strange monsters. The girl wanted to know how they were going to resurrect the body if it was already deprived of its head. As it turned out, since the carrier was beheaded, he would not die even if beheaded. Xingtian also added that you should not avoid him, because he would not harm anyone. In fact, the girl wasn't hiding on purpose, it's just that his beheaded man is clearly terrified of her. It was unacceptable for the deity to stop her from being afraid of him. He could only do one thing. Namely, to remove the outer clothing that he was wearing. As soon as he did this, Zhu Anhao was truly amazed by what he saw. The stunned guy watched as the spirit took off his outer clothing and demonstrated how he sees and hears with only his body without a head. Zhurong immediately understood that although many years had passed, Xingtian had not changed. Seeing such a sight, Simo immediately blushed, because she had never seen anything like this before. As it turned out, the ancient spirit actually had eyes and a mouth on its body, because in this way he could see and speak. Barely holding back her laughter, the girl tried not to laugh. Even the main character tried not to laugh, because such a sight was truly unusual. Still, the girl could not hold back her laughter, and she began to laugh with all her might, so that her tears began to flow. Zhu Anhao, in turn, also laughed because he could no longer hold back. After putting his clothes back on, Xingtian asked them to stop laughing, because they had come here to discuss matters after all. This afternoon, 2 bodies of a man and a woman were again discovered in Nanhu Park. This is the 5th such incident that has occurred in this city. Although the police conducted a thorough investigation, the criminal was still not found. The news asked residents to be as careful as possible and avoid walking in deserted areas. Simo remembered that she also heard about this, and all the students were warned that this perverted maniac deliberately chooses only couples as his victims. The spirit without a head, in turn, suggested that these cases are the work of non-human hands, and most likely, an possessed person. He thinks that the spirit that has taken possession of him needs human heads for his incarnation of the monster. With regret, the guy listened to the dialogue all this time and drew conclusions. The god of fire, in turn, suggested that if people's heads are needed for their incarnation into a monster, then it is probably some kind of minor demon, and nothing more. Traces of a residual demonic aura were discovered near the crime scene, and judging by it, the killer is far from a weakling. And if they continue to remain inactive, then it is unknown what this could lead to. But if Simo and Zhuzhong unite, they will definitely be able to drive out this arrogant demon. This sentence made the fire god smile, because the ancient god Xingtian himself suddenly began to worry about the fate of the human race. Because of which, Zhurong immediately realized that they should speak frankly, and Xingtian just wants his head back and that's all. It turned out that he was not like Mrs. Nuiva. Whether the human race exists or not, he doesn't care at all. And it makes no difference whether he will be at least 3 times a demon or a god. After all, if you touch the god of fire, he will spend the rest of his life as a pile of ashes. Xingtian, in turn, insisted that tens of thousands of years had passed, and his conceit was still immense, and Zhurong had not changed a bit. Although in fact Zhurong is the patron god of fire, and he is very powerful, but only now he is a simple guardian spirit. And the potential of the descendant determines the limits of the power available to him. Relying on such a cowardly, weak and sluggish carrier, only pitiful demons will be able to do it, they are stronger than that demon of envy. The fire god still thought that this was not a problem, because in the near future he is going to devote time to properly training this dead guy. This expression extremely outraged Zhu Anhao, and he asked not to make decisions so spontaneously, and in general he wants to live the life of an ordinary student. In fact, the guys simply didn't get the point of what was happening. The possessed, devouring their own kind, increase their strength, and they are unlikely to spare him due to the fact that he has little strength. Moreover, if God alone is consumed, then without his support of divine fire the hero will clearly not last long. If the guy doesn't want to just die, then he'll have to become much stronger and master the power of fire. Without saying a word, the hero pushed Zhuzhong away and drew conclusions for himself. In the end, he only said that he understood everything and did not want to talk about this topic anymore. Some time later, events took place in one of the university classrooms. Feeling very tired, the main character walked through the corridors and looked for his audience. Suddenly, someone came up behind him and put his hand on his shoulders. It was Yu Qiwu, who turned to his brother and asked him where he had been all night, because he never returned to his room. Zhu Anhao only replied that he was settling some personal matters. In any case, the hero couldn't tell him that he had been exorcising demons all night yesterday. At that same second, an unpleasant sight came into his field of vision as an unsuspecting guy. Namely, that his ex-girlfriend is kissing a new guy. Mino was happy and kissed and hugged with her new boyfriend. Yu Qiu immediately realized that this girl apparently didn't hang much on the tree of shame, and if he were in her place, he wouldn't have come to the couples. Heard this, the new guy started screaming, because he didn't want anyone to insult his girlfriend. In any case, Yu Qiwu didn't care about this, because he could even go out with this guy into the corridor, because he was just about to take out the trash outside the audience. His friend immediately asked the guy not to pay attention to him. After all, if this stupid hat bites him, then he won't bite it back. Everyone in the audience immediately began to laugh loudly, because such a comparison really made absolutely everyone laugh. And only the scoundrel and his girlfriend were extremely angry about this. They were simply furious. Meanwhile, Mino was thinking that this boy had recently given the impression of an inexperienced fool, but now he began to look very courageous. Suddenly, the teacher came in and announced the beginning of the lesson, after which he asked everyone not to make noise. Continuing to watch this couple, the main character thought about what was happening. And the guy didn't understand why, when he saw them flirting, he was surprisingly not the least bit upset. The god of fire, in turn, thought that this was because he had met a rare beauty. That is why he lost interest in this impudent harlot. The guy denied what was happening all this time, because he became indifferent to Mino, not at all because he fell in love with Simo. The quick-witted side immediately realized that the boy had given himself away, because he did not talk about Simo. Suddenly, someone came out into the audience and started calling for the main character. All the guys and even the teacher were stunned by the sight of such a beauty. It was Simo, and she had very important business with Zhu Anhao. The students immediately started looking at the guy and thinking about how lucky he was. From extreme awkwardness, his hands even began to shake, and he did not know how to respond to this. Meanwhile, in the audience, the girls were discussing that a girl named Simo had come to Zhu Anhao. The guys, in turn, wanted to know what kind of relationship the main character had with this girl. Some even guessed that perhaps she was his girlfriend. A lot of guys thought that with a girl like Simo, only a fool would continue to date this blotter named Mino. The ex-girlfriend began to be indignant, because she heard all these discussions and was simply furious. Turning to her new boyfriend, Mino wanted to get support from him, but even the guy thought that Simo was just a wonderful girl. Going out into the corridor, Anhao began to communicate with the girl who visited him. Due to the fact that last night was very tiring, and they didn't even sleep a wink, the guy wanted to understand what the girl was doing here, because he thought that she was sleeping at home. Due to the fact that the night turned out to be crazy, the lady could not sleep, and she also noticed that something was wrong with her body. All this time, the students behind the wall eavesdropped on their conversation, and heard that they had not closed their eyes at night, and that something was wrong with the girl's body. Yu Qiwu immediately guessed that they could tire each other out all night, but he could not do anything, because he had no evidence. After a moment, a worried Simo revealed her abilities, which she began to master. Although she didn't know why, it seemed that the girl could now control the water. Seeing this, the student was extremely surprised, because he could not understand how this happened. Only the girl suspected that this was somehow connected with what happened last night. The god of fire confirmed her words, because the girl correctly noticed, all because her spiritual power awakened, and the suffering spirit had already paid attention to her body. Going outside to the park, they continued their discussions to avoid the public. Together they discussed what happened last night. As it turned out, suffering spirits do not have a vessel, they can easily disappear, so they constantly follow bodies filled with spiritual power in the hope of preserving their lives. Simo immediately began to assume that perhaps she could turn into a terrible monster, as was the case with her friend, but Zhuzhong could not know this, because spirits, like people, can be good and evil. There are those who brazenly seize control over the body of their host, for example, like the demon of envy. There are also those like Xingtian who try in every possible way to revive the body of their vessel. However, this is not to say that there is no way to resist them. That girl easily became possessed by a demon because her spirit was weak and vicious, which is why she could not resist. So you need to train, strengthening your spiritual strength, and then it can easily suppress the spirit sleeping inside. Since ancient times, the god of fire has two scrolls of special techniques. One is called the Will o' the Flame technique, and the other is the Protection of Dark Water. Each scroll has its own beginning of light and darkness. If a person decides to master these techniques on his own, then he will inevitably face death from the sizzling heat or incredible cold. Only through joint training with the harmony of light and darkness will it be possible to master these techniques productively, and it seems that Zhu Anhao really liked this proposal. He even thought that this would be the training that was shown in the novels that he had previously read. This comparison upset the girl, and she began to cry when she heard it. Soon after this, Deity asked the guy to stop thinking about such things, because she considered him preoccupied. People really had the imagination they needed, and there was no need to make things so complicated. The main thing is that they should not be too far away from each other during training, this way their spiritual power can harmonize with each other. And now they should remember what needs to be done, and at this moment the first stage of training will begin. Through joint efforts, Simo and Anhao began to cultivate their abilities and meditate close to each other. Watching the guy, the god of fire realized that this kid didn't stand out at all, but the girl is the opposite, because she has considerable talent. In such a short period of time, she was able to learn new skills and make good progress. Continuing to draw conclusions, God actually thought that this was a very interesting phenomenon. Meanwhile, the guy gradually began to open his eyes. Having finished meditating, he only said that this training was useless for him, because he did not feel any changes at all. Sighing from the hard work, Zhurong asked him to continue, because training was never seen to be easy. Even the girl sighed from the severity of the workout, and sweat appeared on her face. She also felt a strange feeling, because her body seemed to become much lighter. The joyful god of fire, in turn, asked the girl to return and rest properly, and also to train in the same spirit for 3 days and not to try to miss a day of training. Tired Simo was very happy that Mr. Zhurong was training her, and thanked him from the bottom of her heart. The tired boy, in turn, said that it was probably time for them to go too. Approaching closer, Zhuzhong asked the guy to wait, because their training had just begun. Overcoming fatigue and pain, the main character continued to train and apply new techniques. With every second, he gained new skills, and he showed agility skills. The training was indeed extremely fruitful, because many techniques were learned there. Zhu Anhao tried literally with all his might, because he wanted to finish this training as soon as possible and at least rest a little. The merciless god was extremely unhappy with this, because the blows were very weak. Zhuzhong even thought that the boy was eating very little, because he had little strength. Besides, the heroes still didn't understand why he had to study martial arts, and also to make such enormous efforts, because training was extremely difficult for him. It is necessary to learn martial arts because soaring flame is a very powerful technique, and if a guy is not in good shape, he will not master this technique. Because it is unknown how he was going to fight off enemies, if they don't know a single technique. Conditionally he wants to be a whipping boy. Zhu Anhao still could not understand whether it is really necessary to learn martial arts, if they just need to strengthen the body. In modern there are special places in the world where you can pump up your muscles. Surprisingly, God did not know this, and asked if there really were such places in the human world. This was indeed the case, and the hero decided to show God what these places were. Arriving at one of the gyms, Zhu Anhao saw Xiao Qing working hard on the treadmill. Feeling very tired and sighing heavily, the girl still continued to train, because she wanted to achieve new records. As soon as she saw the recluse who came to the gym, she was incredibly happy, because she had long wanted to involve her brother in training. Suddenly, some guy decided to approach Xiaoqing because he had been watching her for a long time. He is the head of Hao's boxing club, Changwan, and decided to ask Xiaoqing to be his girlfriend, because together they can arrange more interesting training, and the guy is not a failure in this either. This guy must really not have been joking, and the hero realized that no one had previously thought that Xiaoqing was so popular. Suddenly, the girl pressed herself against Zhu Anhao, and she said that she already had a boyfriend, because they had an old agreement, the hero should pretend to be her boyfriend so that she could blow off other guys. Remembering this, the guy also confirmed that he was already dating Xiaoqing. Changwan obviously did not appreciate this, and decided to get to the bottom of the main character. This scoundrel believed that no one would listen to such a weakling, and he was generally unworthy of being with such a girl. Due to the fact that Changwan did not want to listen to Zhu Anhao, he decided to explain to him more clearly. Suddenly Xiaoqing stopped the hero and said that he was not a rival for such a big guy. Patting the girl on the head, he only asked her to calm down. After all, with the help of his skills, Anhao will be able to defeat him with just his left hand. Blushing with embarrassment, the girl only began to watch what would happen next. Together they decided to go to a boxing match. The embittered Changwan believed that he would not leave a wet spot behind this brat. At the same time, the guy didn't understand why the god of fire was so angry, but one way or another, it would be a wonderful training session, which means he should be able to cope with some pathetic human without any problems, and if he loses, he'll simply disgrace himself. The concerned friend continued to watch her friend, who was fighting a boxer who weighed 3 times as much. The huge guy wanted his opponent to bite the invincible left hook. Physically, the hero's body is really developed enough to fight people. He can easily evade attacks of this level reflexively. With the help of acquired dexterity, it is indeed possible to evade better than an ordinary person. This approach to combat makes my opponent extremely angry, because he believed that the guy had decided to stage a ballet here, and did not understand how long he would evade, because stop running and need to fight. Zhu Anhao experienced great difficulties, because it was becoming more and more difficult to dodge the blows with each passing second. For a second, the guy remembered that it was necessary to use the technique that Zhuzhong taught him. Using his magical powers, he wanted to perform a fire strike and hit his opponent with all his might. Only with the help of one attack was it possible to neutralize the opponent, hitting him directly in the chest. The overweight guy fell to the floor like a girl and didn't move anymore. This outcome of events began to make the public rejoice, and Xiaoqing could not understand how this even happened. Because the winner was indeed Zhu Anhao, and Changwan was the loser. Fortunately, the hero was finally able to win on his own, and this was unexpected, because he knocked out the captain of the boxing club with one blow. Some time later, events continued to occur late in the evening. Namely, in a fast food restaurant, the joyful friend exclaimed that the guy should come, because today she was treating him. The girl was also very interested in how he taught him to fight so well, because he didn't even tell her about it. Anhao explained that everything was simple, and he was lucky. After all, they had known each other since childhood, and he wouldn't hide such a talent. On the other hand, Xiaoqing has been using him for a very long time as a shield from his fans. Thus, the hero suggested that perhaps there was something wrong here. Then he concluded that Xiaoqing might prefer girls instead of boys. This statement made the girl extremely angry, and she could not believe that her friend from childhood was talking about this. In fact, she already has someone she likes, so she won't accept others' feelings. Anhao couldn't even imagine that with her character she would have an object of secret adoration, so he wanted to find out the name of this handsome and lucky guy. Confused even more, the girl shouted that he should try to figure it out. Suddenly, a stranger began to walk past them, wearing a dark cloak that covered his face. The god of fire, together with the main character, immediately felt a demonic aura that was very nearby. Due to the fact that the demon was discovered, the guy had an urgent matter and needed to go urgently. The friend didn't even have time to get up when her object of adoration immediately left somewhere. She immediately began to feel sad, because she was never able to talk about her feelings. Continuing to be embarrassed, she only believed that her beloved was a fool. At the same time, the main character was already running somewhere on the street. Because there was a demonic aura nearby, the demon longed for death, and this was probably the same maniac. A loud scream began to be heard not far from here, and Jerome prepared to fight. Looking into the alley, they wanted to see who was screaming. Seeing the man who had been hiding all this time, the hero immediately exclaimed that this was the same demon killer. As it turned out, it was a girl who was wearing a dark cloak. The lady could not even think that by the smell, she would be able to understand that she would be lucky to meet her brother. The god of fire inside the hero shouted that he would never fraternize with a murderer like her, which is why he used animation. The mysterious girl immediately realized that he was also a fire type, which was really sad because it was better for them not to get into a fight. Just like last time, the guy was going to use the blow that he learned from Zhuzhong. The rival was also ready for a fight, and began to use her abilities, which she acquired when the demon took over. The possessed girl used an ability called Fire Step and hit the hero with all her might. From a blow of such force, Zhu Anhao began to experience incredible pain and coughed. And then he completely crashed into the wall, creating a huge hole in it. Even if they both form a flame, the difference in the strength of their fire is colossal. That is why the girl was going to fry him so that he would not get in the way. Suddenly, the hero exclaimed that she was indeed right. These words surprised the villainess, and she decided to listen to her enemy. The difference in the strength of their flame is truly incomprehensible, said the hero. And judging by her current flame, if Zhurong is not mistaken, then this demon's name is Bifang. Feeling an irresistible rage, the demon again began to give the girl even more strength. Having transformed, the demon decided to show his true essence and began his transformation. And it was really Bifan who showed her true image. Suddenly, Bifang walked up to Mr. Zhurong and hugged him, because she missed him very much and did not expect that he would have to turn into a spirit. None of the ordinary people understood what was happening here. As it turns out, Bifan is a divine beast, his beast is a follower, naturally she is not related to the bounty hunter. The girl also confirmed that they were not involved in this, and in general they are hunters of evil spirits, so in search of that crazy spirit, they came here in the hope of finding clues. So-called demon hunters are people who specialize in killing evil spirits, and spirits are regarded as a trophy. The hunter has every right to absorb the spiritual power of his prey in order to increase his level. Who would have thought that the guardian spirit would be Zhurong? With such an ancient deity, he would really quickly force everyone to submit to him. The hero, at the same time, did not care about her business, and he just wants to find the spirit killing people. If he continues to be allowed to rampage, then even greater losses cannot be avoided. Then the girl suggested that perhaps they should join forces, because judging by his observations, the thug begins to attack only couples, and among them, at least one has a guardian spirit. And since they both have guardian spirits, pretending to be lovers, and will ambiguously attract the attention of the killer, the girl decided to introduce herself. Her name was by Manhwa, and she decided to find out what this guy's name was. The god of fire also exclaimed that he is generally happy with any beautiful girl, and it's time for the guy to stop being embarrassed by such trifles. After all, he is a man. Together they decided to meet tomorrow in the park at 7 p.m. and not be late, after which they parted for a while. This girl is really very determined, but the guy still realized that it would be good to call the police first. Some time later, events continued to occur in the park in the evening. Anhao asked Zhurong whether he should trust this girl named by Manhwa, but the god of fire didn't know, because she is Bifang's vessel, so there is no doubt about her. Suddenly, something caught the guy's attention, namely, a beauty who apologized to her beloved for making him wait so long. The embarrassed guy asked the girl not to snuggle so close, but by Manhwa insisted that they need to snuggle closer, because if they don't look natural, then the killer might not fall for them. Suddenly, someone behind him spoke to Zhu Anhao. It was Simo, who clearly did not expect to see her savior here with some stranger. She couldn't believe her eyes, and assumed that it was his girlfriend. Justifying himself, the guy asked me to draw hasty conclusions and listen to him, because he will now explain everything. The girl began to tremble from what she saw, and could not tolerate such betrayal. Because of what she saw, she also left, because she believed that it did not mean anything, because they were not close enough for him to explain himself, so she wished him to continue to enjoy the date. Afterwards, she also shouted that the guy can date whoever he wants, but it doesn't concern her at all. Bai Fenghua hugged the main character and wanted to find out who this girl was. After all, they planned to devote this evening only to each other. This behavior irritated unfortunate Simo even more, who gradually began to fall in love with the guy. It is quite possible that the killer has now paid attention to them, if they open up now, otherwise their efforts will go to waste. Although Zhu Anhao knew this, when they catch the culprit, they will definitely explain everything to the offended girl. In any case, they needed to move on, and they needed at least some kind of plan. With a wink, the girls said that they would do what all couples in love do. Namely, they will go to the cinema to watch a film. Together they started watching a romantic film, which had very touching scenes. Although this film is legendary, after a large number of viewings, it did not evoke any emotions in the guy, but the girl began to cry, because it was very touching. Even the gods decided to cry, because no one expected that this film could touch them. Then, they went to a restaurant because they decided to eat together like true lovers. The guy, meanwhile, did not understand why they even came to such an expensive luxurious restaurant, because he is not that rich. Suddenly, the girl asked not to worry, because she decided to treat him. She should not be underestimated, because the income from hunting demons is quite decent. A nice waiter came up to them and apologized for the very long wait. Suddenly, as if by accident, he threw over a glass of champagne. Some of the champagne fell directly on the girl, and she was dumbfounded by what was happening. The polite waiter apologized and wanted to wipe everything off immediately, but the girl only asked not to do this, because she would do everything herself. Going to the restroom, the waiter began to smile sarcastically and look at himself in the mirror. He thought that this was just a wonderful event, because a wonderful prey fell into his net, which is why he was very lucky. Some time later, events continued to occur late at night. The couple has already managed to go to the movies and have a nice dinner at a restaurant. But they still didn't understand whether they were able to draw the killer's attention to themselves. Bai Fanhua even thought that she played the role of a girl in love poorly. Or maybe they forgot to do something that lovers usually do. For example, go to the love hotel. Zhu Anhao was very embarrassed by such a proposal, and even blushed. Without being embarrassed at all, Bai Fanhua seemed to be saying this in all seriousness, and was ready to do anything to catch the killer. Overcoming embarrassment, the hero nevertheless agreed to go there, but the lady was against it because she was not ready to go to such an establishment on the first date. She thought that it would be better for them if they tried to lure him to a more secluded place, because the killer would not act in a crowded place. Because of this, the couple went into the gateway, where there were absolutely no people. None of them felt the aura of the possessed spirit, and it seemed that the killer did not take the bait. Suddenly, Zhurong decided to help get things moving. A moment later, he had already possessed the unsuspecting guy, who was simply shocked by this turn of events. Having begun to act, the Side of Fire decided to do everything possible to attract the attention of the killer. Indignant even more, the girl shouted, "What is he up to?" But the hero answered her that couples should kiss. In the film, this is exactly what they did. If their thug is nearby, he will definitely decide to attack, taking advantage of the moment. Realizing that it could work, Bai Fanhua still agreed. With every second the guy moved closer and closer to kiss. And so, their lips were already very close, and were supposed to merge into a passionate kiss. At that same second, someone nearby began to make noise. The couple immediately heard and realized that someone was walking nearby. It turned out that it was Simo, who was on her knees in despair. She felt incredible pain because she had been watching the couple all this time. When the girl was asked why she was hanging out here, she only replied that she was just walking, and it just so happened that she happened to be nearby. But this was a really strange excuse, because the place to walk is very strange in the dead of night. Before lying, it is better to think through the excuse in advance, the hero noticed. Zhu Anhao still decided to explain everything, and said that they are not in a relationship, and they are just having a temporary cooperation and that's all, which is why there is nothing to worry about. Surprised even more, the girl wanted to know why they were collaborating, but it was a long story, and it should be explained later, when there is more time. A moment later, a man said that he was afraid that the guy would no longer have such an opportunity to explain everything. The same killer had been watching them all this time and was ready to attack. Because right now, they must die here. The attentive girl immediately determined that this was the same waiter from the restaurant. He only works as a waiter when he pretends to be a human. After all, it's easier to find prey when he's in the skin of a human. And if this killer himself decided to confess everything, then the heroes decided to use the animation technique. Not the least bit embarrassed by Bai Fanhua's transformation, the killer noticed that this greatly simplified the matter. So the scoundrel used an ability called Spiritual Relaxant. Several extremely fast attacks were launched directly at Manhwa, and it was as if she could not move. Seeing such an attack, Zhu Anhao and Simo were simply amazed at this guy's skills. At that very second, the girl could no longer move at all, or was just crawling. It was the liquid that the waiter then spilled on her. It was as if it was originally poison, which is why it had such an effect after using magical abilities. This liquid was the venom of a snake of dark waters, and it tastes quite good, since the girl has such a strong guardian spirit as Bifan. Then, by isolating her, he deprived them of their last opportunity to cope with the killer, thus Fanhua has no choice but to absorb the poison and feel the attack of the poisonous bite. The brave guy decided to help and blocked this attack. Not expecting such a turn of events, the killer was even amazed by this outcome. It seems that this scoundrel decided that the girl was much stronger than Zhu Anhao, and because the killer dared to insult the hero like that, he will burn him alive, because he is a stinking sewage dweller. Hearing this answer, the assassin laughed because fire attacks would not cause him any harm, and he activated his water shield. Continuing to attack, the guy wanted to see if this scoundrel could really block an attack with water magic. To counter the impudence, a powerful technique was used, called a will-o'-the-wisp strike. This technique actually worked, and the scoundrel could not understand how this was possible. The stunned killer felt the full power of this blow, and water began to flow from his mouth. With just one blow, the villain was defeated and flew several hundred meters to the side. Having hit the wall, he made a deep hole in it, and from powerlessness he could not move. Continuing to look at his opponent, the scoundrel realized that this guy was really very strong. And in this case, you will have to really tinker with such an opponent. The killer even thought that this guy was really equal in strength to Bifan. Apparently, he will have to use his most powerful technique, which he kept secret all this time. Wishing his enemy's death, he decided to use the demon to its full potential. And I wanted to leave only skulls from these people after the fight. A moment later, the scoundrel began to turn into liquid and spread across the floor. This technique really looked very unusual and dangerous for opponents. Fire decided to help the hero and began to protect him, flying up right in front of him. Many pieces of an incomprehensible substance began to fly straight towards Zhu Anhao. These pieces of dark matter clung to his body and spread directly over each part of his skin. On the hero's body there was even a silhouette of a face that seemed to want to get out. And this really happened. An unknown substance came straight out of the hero, as if attacking him from the inside. Thus, the evil demon wanted to devour Zhu Anhao and leave no trace of him. Using this technique, the killer wanted to make his opponent a part of himself, and all he can do is watch how his body gradually turns into a thick substance. Meanwhile, Zhu Anhao was thinking that his end would really come here, but Zhurong asked the guy not to worry, and put his thoughts in order, because he will now teach him to use the true power of the will-o'-the-wisp. He should circulate his energy exactly as God says, and direct it from the inside out, as if releasing it. Closing his eyes, the main character tried to force the energy to splash out. It really helped, because with maximum concentration, his body began to be covered with fire magic. Observing everything that was happening, the scoundrel already understood what kind of rival he was dealing with. Screaming with all his might, the guy released all the energy outward, and thereby a powerful fire attack was applied throughout the entire area that was nearby. The evil demon could not understand how this was possible, and how they could defeat him with just one attack. A powerful pillar of light headed straight into the sky from the scene of the incident. Even Fanhua was amazed by such incredible power. The main character was incredibly weak from the strongest attack. And the god of fire understood that in such a situation it would be incredibly difficult to cope with such a complex technique as the Great Flame. And don't underestimate Zhu Anhao because he didn't even show his full strength. This creature looked like some kind of monster, and the scoundrel continued to threaten that once his body was restored, he would continue the fight. Without listening to him to the end, the guy came closer. Getting even angrier, Anhao decided to ask this lump of dirt where he was going. And how was he able to survive after such a strong flame? He really is tenacious, like some kind of mud worm. In any case, the guy wanted to complete the job to the end. The scoundrel, hearing these words, smiled and said that they would see each other again, because he could leave this body. Coming out of his body in the form of a spirit, he shouted that he would find something new for himself and was going to inhabit another person. Heading towards Simo, he seemed to be planning to possess her. The frightened girl began to cry with fear, because she did not know what could be expected from this scoundrel. The demonic soul penetrated directly into the girl's flesh, and made her fall to the floor. The demon inside her spoke and made the girl smile, saying that this body was indeed very beautiful. The scoundrel could not even think that there was so much spiritual energy in her body, and having captured this body, even hundreds of years spent on self-development would no longer seem like a big loss. This demon was called the Serpent of Dark Waters, and the villain was able to seize the girl's body by force. Watching everything that was happening, Zhu Anhao could not understand how this happened and what they should do now. The god of fire decided to help him, and said that he didn't have much energy left. If they don't do anything now, then the cursed snake will completely recover, and then they won't be able to do anything. They can only take advantage of the moment and kill the girl. The main character incredibly disliked this proposal, and he was indignant because he did not want to do it. Although the gods are not omnipotent, if the hero lacks the courage, then Zhurong can do it. The guy got even more angry and ordered God to stop doing this, because he must find another way to save the girl. But the god of fire did not listen to the ordinary guy, and possessed him in order to kill Simo. The man continued to resist and did not give him the opportunity to control his body. Resisting, he ordered Zhurong to stop controlling him, because he forbids harming the beloved, and one cannot arbitrarily use his body. Feeling the resistance, the fire god considered this guy an asshole and didn't understand when he learned to resist his control. Suddenly, an unknown girl spoke and said that although because of her, she felt uncomfortable, but thanks to her appearance in this space, she was finally able to awaken. It was an unknown deity who was right in Shimo all this time. The deity ordered the dark spirit to leave this space. Insisting on his own, the unknown god ordered the evil spirit to leave the girl's body. Although she slept for a long time, some worthless snake demon dared to become impudent and create disturbances in the human world. Even the god of fire, along with the main character, were stunned by what they saw. Zhuzhong never thought that they would meet again under such circumstances. 1,000 years ago, events took place near a pond in the forest, where Zhuzhong, together with a fire bird, sang his favorite song. Suddenly, someone nearby seemed to begin to drown in the water. She was a little girl who looked like a water demon, but it was strange that she didn't feel any demonic aura at all. As soon as the girl saw the mysterious man, she was immediately extremely surprised. The god of fire immediately wanted to find out from the girl who she was, and suggested that she was a deity, but, embarrassed, the girl only began to wave her head. When Zhurong asked if she was a demon, the girl also started shaking her head. Then, the experienced deity decided to find out if the girl had a family or close friends. But from her facial expression one could understand that she had absolutely no one, because she immediately began to cry. And if the girl has no one, then she can travel with the god of fire, and this is exactly what he offered her. Surprised by this proposal, the girl seemed to receive hope. And she happily agreed to such an offer, because no one had wanted to spend time with her before. Extending her hand to the god of fire, she agreed to his conditions, and that she would help him all the time. However, in real time, the fire god could not have thought that he would meet his old friend. Having created a huge ice hammer, the girl began to swing it, as if trying to attack her friend. This really scared the main character, and he was afraid to approach the girl possessed by a deity. It seemed like Simo wanted to attack Zhurong, as if he wanted him dead. Bowing his head down, the deity said the name Zhuzhong, and with an incredibly angry look, the girl shouted that she would kill the fire god. This surprised the company of Zhu Anhao and God even more. A mere mortal immediately demanded an explanation, but God believed that now was not the right time. Suddenly, Zhuzhong said that there was no need to be afraid, because he had a plan, and he shouted that he needed to run wherever his eyes were looking. At that same second, the side of the fire began to run away from the girl with all its strength. Continuing to be angry, Simo seemed to want to take revenge on them, and shouted that they would not leave. But a small pebble under her feet could have interfered with the pursuit, and the girl tripped over it, because of which, she fell to the ground and dropped her ice hammer, causing it to break. Observing the injured girl, the heroes drew conclusions. Meanwhile, Simo continued to reach for her ice hammer to recreate it again. Upon realizing this, God immediately realized that her spiritual power was gone, but apparently they would not be safe for long. The alarmed protagonist decided to approach his beloved and find out if she was alive. But someone said that you should relax, because this happened due to the fact that this was the girl's first animation, and she spent a lot of spiritual energy, and if she rests properly, then everything will be fine with her. In addition, Xingtian also said that no one could have thought that Gong Simo's guardian spirit would be Gonggong herself, even he could not imagine it. Having flown closer to Xingtian, Zhurong pinched his cheek and ordered him not to poke his nose into other people's business, and the boy begged him not to pinch him, because his face would soon swell. Suddenly, Bai Fanhua turned to Xingtian and wanted to know what Mr. Chairman was doing here. As if nothing had happened, the joyful god decided to jump from the roof in order to get closer to the girl. He brought her medicine that would get rid of the poison of the snake of dark waters. She should use it quickly in order to survive. The joyful girl thanked the chairman, because this time she had made a mistake, because this snake turned out to be extremely cunning, and she almost died from her trick. The main character was at a loss, because he didn't understand why this guy was considered the chairman. As it turns out, Mr. Baijie is the chairman of the Council of Evil Spirit Hunters, and the guy does not show him due respect by communicating with him in this way. Zhu Anhao, in turn, did not believe in this, and asked him to stop pranking him, because this huckster was simply earning extra money on streams. In fact, the Evil Spirit Hunter organization was created by several strong spirits. Well, since there is no one in the world who understands demons and gods better than him, he was invited to the association, and besides, he is not the only chairman. The god of fire could not believe what he heard, and that there could be stronger spirits than him, which is why he wanted to meet them. Baijie explained that even though Mr. Zhurong is an ancient god, however, due to the changes that occurred in the world, even the pitiful dark water snake was able to become more powerful. This means that it is quite natural that there will be other stronger spirits. Suddenly, the strongest warriors noticed that a small snake was crawling right along the floor. She was immediately grabbed so that this impudent water snake would not run far. Starting to wriggle, the snake apologized, because it was her fault that she exploded too much, so she asked to be let go. Due to the fact that they did not know what to do with this misunderstanding, they came up with the idea of making snake soup. Suddenly, Baijie asked to get the book Encyclopedia of Demons and Gods to look at something there. After all, this was necessary because evil spirits are not so easy to destroy, but they can be sealed in his book and gradually absorbed. Thus, the owner of the Encyclopedia of Demons and Gods will become stronger depending on the number of demons that he imprisons in this book. Hearing this, the hero immediately activated his spiritual seal. Using this spell, the snake was brazenly sealed directly into the Book of Demons and Gods to make the owner much stronger. Thus, the insolent demon now could not get out of there, because he was forever left in this book. Although the drawings in this book were still ugly, the book itself is very large, and the guy decided to ask what would happen if we collected absolutely all the spirits into it. The creator of the book explained that if you collect all the spirits, you can get his limited edition photo album. In this album, Baijie is depicted in completely different images, and only a select few could see this. Meanwhile, a stranger who was simply gigantic in size approached the arguing guys. The unknown and mysterious guy understood that the real fun would soon begin. At the same time, Baijie remembered something else that he wanted to do. Since the two of them caught the snake of dark waters, the reward for its capture will be divided equally between them. It was something like payment for work. Zhu Anhao immediately wanted to know how much money he would receive. As it turned out, since this snake belongs to the third rank of enemies, a reward of approximately 200,000 is due for it, and accordingly the hero will receive about 100,000. This amount simply amazed the main character, and he was incredibly happy. The girl just waved her hands, and in fact, this money is just a pleasant addition, a real reward for the captured spirit, so we should consider that he was pretty lucky this time. The angry god of fire, meanwhile, wanted to find out from the brat where he got so much money, because he did not say that he owned such a huge amount of finance. The Demon Hunter Association is supported by many influential people, namely, merchants, politicians, stars. Jerome cannot even imagine how influential they all are, and it is quite possible that each of them is a descendant of demons or gods. At the same time, the guy was worried about Simo's condition, because she was still unconscious. They immediately began to joke about the worried guy, saying that this was a great opportunity to go to a hotel for couples. The conscientious guy nevertheless decided to take the girl home. He literally pulled her on himself in order to deliver her safely to her room. Some time later, they almost reached the entrance to the apartment building. Turning to the concierge, the hero explained that this girl had drunk too much, which is why he asked to open the door so that he could carry her upstairs. But the woman was against this, because it was already late at night, and it was forbidden to let anyone through. This behavior extremely angered the god of fire, and he wanted to burn this nasty woman, because she was preventing them from getting into the dormitory. It turned out that women have been working as watchmen for several years, and I've already seen enough people here who bring drunk girls. And unfortunately, the woman still did not open the door for them. Having finally closed the door, she still did not let in the couple, who were so eagerly waiting for the opportunity to enter. Jurong at the same time drew attention to the objects that the woman so kindly threw right in the face of the main character, but he only asked not to pay attention to it. Some time later, events continued to occur at the couple's hotel. Entering the room, the guy immediately realized that the impression from it was really not comforting. As it turned out, this was really the only free room. That's how the guy was explained at the reception. Placing Simo on the bed, the hero began to wait for her to recover. The girl suddenly started to blush because she felt very hot. Watching his beloved, the guy admired her, because he thought she was really very cute. The smart god of fire said that this little girl is now unconscious, so that no matter what happens now, when she wakes up, she won't remember it, so if he wants to do something, he's not against it. Embarrassed, Zhu Anhao only replied that he did not want to do anything with her. Zhurong immediately considered that his partner was indeed very weak, and in this case, let him do what he wants. Listening to God, the guy understood that if things went on like this, something irreparable could happen, which is why he wanted to go take a cool shower. Let's go to the bath. He thought about the fact that the snake of the dark here, as well as the hunters of spirits, he had the feeling that he was moving further and further away from ordinary life. Having come to his senses a little, the guy still realized that he should stop stressing himself out, take a swim, and then immediately fall asleep, and tomorrow, as expected, explain everything to Simo. Meanwhile, Simo began to come to her senses and wake up. She felt incredibly thirsty, and believed that the human body was indeed very difficult to adapt to. Feeling hot, the girl began to gradually take off her outerwear. In order to cool down a little, she also took off her dress. Suddenly, the guy heard someone approaching. In order to find out what the sounds were, he began to look out of the shower and thought that Simo had woken up. It was true that I, an indignant girl, wanted to know where the water was. Feeling embarrassed, Zhu Anhao shouted for the girl to get out of here because he hadn't even gotten dressed yet. With a smile on her face, she again said that he was Jurong. It was because of this that she was going to kill this guy. Not believing that this was really happening, the guy began to think about why this was happening at all. Diligently avoiding Simo, the hero began to run away as quickly as possible. Having found a glass that was nearby, with all her strength the girl threw it straight at her opponent's head. The enemy immediately fell on the bed and experienced a severe headache because the glass hit him directly on the head. Having attacked the guy, Simo wanted to find out why Zhuzhong is so weak now, because killing him in his current state makes no sense. The alarmed boy began to scream and say that he was not Zhuzhong, and in his thoughts begged the god of fire to wake up and explain everything as soon as possible. But God slept all this time and did not hear man's requests at all. The gloating girl understood that now the guy could not resist, because he had nowhere to go, and he should just die peacefully. Suddenly, the girl began to be overcome by strange feelings that she had previously experienced. Experiencing intense fever, Lady did not understand what was happening to her. At that same second, she again fell into an unconscious state and fell asleep. Having started to hug Zhu Anhao, she really fell asleep, and the guy understood that he didn't know what would happen if he woke her up again. That is why he decided that he himself could use a rest. Some time later, events continued to occur the next morning. Realizing that Simo was sleeping not far from the hero, she immediately slapped him on the cheek and began screaming very loudly. Calling everything a misunderstanding, the guy began to make excuses, and wanted to explain what happened, and that the girl was possessed yesterday by a guardian spirit and occupied her consciousness. Looking at her body, Simo could not believe what she heard. After all, she didn't understand whether she would now be controlled by the spirit, and whether she would turn into a monster, just like it was with Xiaoling. Meanwhile, Zhurong also woke up and asked her to calm down, because Gun, of course, is still that little thing, but she is not at all like that fallen spirit, even just she can be considered a protector spirit. The excited guy all this time did not understand why she then rushed at him, as if she really wanted to kill him, or whether they, like fire and water, are incompatible with each other. The embarrassed god of fire explained that it was all because of their past. He and Gun have a very difficult relationship, and when the time comes, he will definitely tell everything. Looking at her phone, the girl immediately noticed what time it was, because in the morning she had to attend a very, very important class. A few minutes later, events continued to occur near the entrance to the hotel. The joyful girl got dressed and said goodbye to the hero in order to go to an important lesson for her. Meanwhile, someone from behind the bushes was photographing the couple, and believed that Simo was saying goodbye to this loser right at the hotel, and this photo would be a real sensation. Jurong noticed that in the morning her thoughts would eat with her, and since it was already morning, she should start training to increase her strength. And all because the hero had very little strength last night, which is why he was almost killed by a snake. If not for the timely help of Gun, he obviously would not have been able to save the girl. Thinking about the current situation, the hero understood that there were a lot of people in the hostel, and if they went to the mountains at this time, then, too, they would most likely stumble upon unwanted fellow travelers, which is why it would be extremely difficult to find a deserted place. But still, after some thought, he had an idea. And there is no need to rack your brains, and you should just go and rent an apartment, because there is a lot of money in his bank account now. Walking into one of the apartments, Zhu Wanhao immediately realized that this apartment was perfect for him, so he immediately agreed to rent it. As it turns out, the reason why apartment rent is so low is because of a ghost that has settled in it. Quite a few tenants had already left this apartment in horror, so that there had been no tenants in it for a long time, so the man strongly recommended considering other housing options, but the determined hero realized that if there really was a ghost here, then it would be even more so in this apartment. The concerned man immediately ran away, because he told them everything. The contract had already been signed. If something happened, their company would not be responsible for it. Fearing that he would see a ghost, the man began to run away in panic and scream. At the same time, the guy didn't care at all about this, and he began to look around the room. There really haven't been people in it for a long time, because everything is covered with dust. Apparently, this apartment really says hello, but is there really a ghost here? The god of fire decided to remind the guy that his body was blessed with divine flames and was literally replete with spiritual power. Ordinary ghosts would not be able to get even half a step closer to him, so he should just continue to train calmly. Realizing this, the hero still understood that the training should be continued, and Zhuzhong thought that he was a great ancient deity, but for some reason he was hanging around with this little sucker, like parents forcing their child to do homework. Events continued to occur several hours later. The diligent hero tried with all his might to cultivate his abilities in order to become much stronger and master more techniques. Suddenly, the boy exclaimed that something had happened to him. He seemed to feel his strength increase slightly. The fire god also noticed that his wandering spirit skill had reached the 3rd rank, and apparently, the battle with the rotten water snake really worked in his favor. With incredible admiration, the guy realized that God had told him that he had indeed become stronger, but his strength increased by only 1,000th of what God had at the dawn of his strength. Out of fatigue, Anhao decided to go to the bath to clean himself up a little, but suddenly he noticed that some kind of unknown red liquid was flowing from the tap. And this is really very strange, because he had never seen anything like this before. Laughing, the guy asked the ghost if this is really all he is capable of. Interference began to appear on the TV, although it had not even been turned on before. Suddenly, a gray hand began to crawl out of the TV itself. This was the unknown girl, who was crawling out of the TV more and more every second. She screamed with all her might and tried to intimidate the hero in this way. The guy didn't care at all about this, and he kicked her on the head with all his might. He also said that this sign does not have a hint of the original, and does he really think that in this way you can scare people using outdated techniques? At that same second, the ghost's hand turned into a dagger, with which she wanted to attack the unsuspecting guy. This gathering was indeed more interesting, and the guy wanted to see what this phantom was capable of. Although he was too slow, the ghost could fly through the air like a bird. Trying to attack, the ghost made many attacks, but the hero easily dodged them, which is why he wanted to find out who this ghost really was. From the blow to the ghost, he began to cry out of nowhere and experience pain. As it turns out, this girl is a ghost who has settled here. But the girl began to deny this, saying that she was a spiritual entity. This explanation clearly did not suit the hero, and he thought that he was being blatantly deceived. The god of fire decided to explain to him that all objects have their own soul, and each object, under certain circumstances, can embody its own soul. Hearing this, the guy immediately released the poor ghost. Since this girl is a spiritual entity, then why, instead of developing, is she alone scaring people who come here for days on end? It turned out that for them, the so-called spiritual entities, they definitely need to be close to their spiritual vessel. But in truth, her spiritual vessel was stolen by a demonic creature, so all she can do is wander around this apartment, unable to either evolve or be reborn. The good-natured Jerome decided to help the poor girl, because since the situation was like this, he was ready to do everything possible. The spiritual essence was amazed, because she thought that the great Lord had decided to return her spiritual vessel. But this was not so. God wanted to incinerate her tormented soul in the flames of his sacred fire. In order to save her from the fate of a restless spirit, the spiritual entity believed that no one needed such help, because he simply decided to tease her. Meanwhile, Zhu Anhao decided to ask what kind of demon stole her spiritual vessel. Having calmed down a little, the entity explained that it was a strong demon, and its name was the Greedy Cat. He really likes to collect various valuable things. Among them there are many spiritual vessels that embody the spiritual essence. Anhao and Zhurong immediately decided that they would now go in search of him and beat him properly. If they can drag him into the Baijia encyclopedia, then it is possible that they will become one more step stronger. The smart god of fire wanted to know since when did the guys start to worry so much about their training, because it was so unexpected that he became inspired, and this is not at all like him. The hero began to talk about how he had just recently been able to master the 3rd level of the Will-o'-the-Wisp spell, and how could one resist the temptation to try it on the skin of a demonic beast. In his thoughts, the guy understood that as soon as he heard the name Greedy Cat, he immediately realized that he must have a whole mountain of treasures, so he could not miss such a wonderful chance to get rich. After some time, events continued to occur late at night in the gorge. The main character was checked by tree branches in order not to attract unnecessary attention and hid. He was guided by a spiritual essence, and the boy wanted to find out if there really was a greedy cat nearby. The ghost decided to point his finger at the cave, which greedy cats leave when they go in search of new treasures. The rest of the time they spend next to their wealth. In anticipation of becoming rich, Anhao began to make his way to the entrance to the cave. And he immediately asked Jerome to be on guard because they were entering the cat's hole. I'm making my way through the cave, but they didn't notice that there were candles lit on the walls, and apparently someone really lives here. Judging by the candles made by fish oil and people, this cat is not that stupid. Suddenly, they saw something similar to the shadow of a greedy cat, which looked very fierce. Meanwhile, the greedy code was rubbing some container to make it shine. Around the cat there was a huge amount of gold coins, diamonds, and other luxury items. Seeing Zhu Anhao, the cat immediately wanted to know who he was and why he came here. Greedy Code looked like an ordinary child, but the god of fire explained that one should not believe this image, because appearances can be deceiving. Angry, the hero shouted that all these things were not his, and he had stolen them, so they should be returned quickly, and maybe he would spare his life. The cat decided to talk about the fact that initially these treasures had no owners, so it cannot be said that he simply stole them. It's just stupid people who don't realize at all what the value of these treasures is, and what's the point of giving such a value to a person's hand will be the same as breaking it. Not wanting to listen to this, the guy understood that this conversation was pointless, and since he didn't want to give up the treasure in an amicable way, then he would beat him and not spare him until he gave up absolutely everything. These words extremely offended the cat, because for him it was horror, because the person is very ill-mannered, which is why he decided to teach him good manners. For what, the greedy code used the shadow whip technique with the help of its several tails. Although he only had 2 tails, but there were a lot of them, due to the too high speed. After images appear, if the tail hits a person at such a speed, then he will have to endure unbearable pain. The attacks from this technique were extremely ferocious and fast, making it even more difficult to avoid. However, one of the attacks hit the hero right on the back, from which he began to experience hellish pain. The greedy cat saw all this time that an ordinary person simply could not keep up with him. If he now humbly admits his defeat and gives him the treasures that he has with him, then so be it. he will not kill this man. Suddenly, the hero was able to grab several tails. This turn of events extremely surprised the greedy cat, because he did not expect that a person would be able to keep up with such a blow. All this time the guy perceived this fight as a joke, because it was impossible to defeat him with such a worthless technique. With the help of magical techniques, fire began to spread right along the tails of the greedy cat, which gradually had to reach the cat itself and hit his body. All this time, the main character only succumbed in this battle, and was easily able to bring down all his power and anger directly on the scoundrel and the thief. After all, right now it was his turn to attack. From the heat received from the fiery attack, the greedy cat literally began to smolder. Using just one attack, Zhu Anhao wanted to know if the cat was going to admit defeat so as not to continue this fight. The god of fire was extremely surprised, because it turns out that he was able to keep up with such speed, and it seems that the result of their training has already begun to show itself. This blow angered the cat even more, because his treasures that had been obtained with such difficulty were destroyed, and his tails began to smolder. That is why the cat shouted that now Anhao could definitely not expect mercy. Seeing that the greedy cat was growing up, the hero could not believe his eyes, and in general he thought that it was a boy. But in fact it was a girl, and in general she did not look like stinking louts, which is why she wanted no one to leave here alive today. The speed of the greedy cat increased several times, and it was not known whether this was her real strength. Even Zhurong never thought that she would be able to use the spiritual treasure, and now it would be very difficult for them to deal with her. The greedy cat's golden whip is capable of turning the flesh it hits into gold, so very soon the hero will turn into a golden man. And this was really so, because the wounds really turned into gold. Zhurong understood that the so-called spiritual treasure is an item created from a large amount of blood and spiritual energy, and, as a rule, each such treasure has its own unique magical property, and since this cat was able to create its own spiritual treasure, then with it is not that simple. At the same time, Gerov knew that now was not the time to create drama, and it seems that the gold on his hands began to spread even further. In this case, if there is no other way to stop it, then all they can do is remove their hands, but don't worry, as soon as the will-o'-the-wisp technique reaches the peak of its development, the guy can easily restore his hands, so much so that there will be no scars left. If you train hard, your palm will recover within 70 or 80 years, but for the hand to fully recover, it will take about 4 or 5 centuries. Meanwhile, someone interrupted the communication between God and the hero. This was their opponent, because he waited until the hero was covered in gold, because he was terribly impatient to make him the crown in the collection of golden things. The hero quickly began to run away, because he was afraid to fight further, so as not to receive even more injuries. While this golden whip is affecting him, he cannot get an inch closer to the opponent, and her spiritual treasure was stolen from a deity as ancient as Zhurong. The god of fire even remembered that he and Bane once made such a noise in the sky when they destroyed demonic offspring. And since this is the case, then rather the guy wanted to ask for his spiritual treasure, so that he could show this demonic cat who is the boss here. Due to the fire god being sealed, he has lost his spiritual treasure as a lot of time has already passed and he has absolutely no idea where it might be. The greedy cat was even more indignant, because her opponent was chatting with his guardian spirit, and she believed that she was very underestimated. With the help of her long tails, the girl was easily able to make the hero stop. And with the help of her superhuman strength, she was easily able to make a blow, in which the guy hit his face straight into the floor with all his strength. The force of the impact threw him several tens of meters to the side and he ended up in another cave. Experiencing severe pain, Zhu Anhao knew that he needed to get up and continue to fight. As it turned out, he ended up in the armory, and the greedy cat thought that he wanted to destroy her. But the guy was much smarter, and was easily able to find a mace, with which he hit his impudent opponent with all his might. Fortunately, due to the strong blow, the greedy cat was unconscious and with a huge bump on her head. Finding a blade that was lying nearby, the guy threw it with all his might straight at the enemy, because he didn't want to die here. Still, he could not get to the blade, and the cat only asked him to stop resisting, because he looked like a mouse that was driven into a corner. In general, the cat has not harmed anyone yet, unlike him, who personally came with his death, and for his stupidity he can only blame himself. I feel that the body is covered with gold, the hero could not even use half of his powers and abilities. Suddenly, Jerome said that who would have thought that he would meet him in this place. He figured out where such a familiar spiritual aura could come from here. Overcoming incredible pain, the hero did not understand what the god of fire was saying. If they don't figure out what to do next, then very soon he will stand as a huge golden statue. Looking around, Zhuzhong felt a raging flame. It must be somewhere nearby, and he must begin to prepare, because together with him, they can easily cope with this cat. But it was clearly not easy, because only he knows where these raging flames are, and the guy is not even able to move. It turned out that the raging flame was a huge spear, which was very nearby. From powerlessness, the guy had already closed his eyes, and thought that now he would lose his life. He prayed that if there was a raging flame here, it would come and give him strength. And it really worked, because the spear ended up right in the hands of the main character. The greedy cat immediately saw that this was the same halberd that she had found 30 years ago. As soon as the hero took it in his hands, it immediately became covered in fire, because it was one of the sacred artifacts. With the help of a halberd, the guy was easily able to get out of the greedy cat's trap. The cat did not understand at all how this was possible, because no one had yet been able to defeat her golden whip. The raging fire took Zhu Anhao for his new master. Although he had been sleeping for a long time, he should be helped to warm up in this battle. Realizing this, Anhao decided to act, to go on the attack. Suddenly, the greedy cat began to insist that this fight should be stopped because she had lost. The main character did not care at all about this, and with the help of the acquired weapon, he used a powerful technique called a raging cut. From the force of the blow, even the volcano began to erupt. This blow was so powerful. Meanwhile, the ghost watched everything that was happening from the side, and thought that this spiritual force was incredibly powerful. After a strong blow, the greedy cat was already on the ground, and was experiencing unbearable pain. Gradually coming to her senses, she thought about how to continue this fight. Zhu Anhao did not want to leave her even the slightest chance of victory, and was already approaching with his halberd. Although this girl was not a coward, now she must understand who is in charge here. Suddenly, the greedy cat turned into a small cat, and began to repeat that she was simply looking for magical curiosities and did not lay a finger on people, and if his mercy decides to spare her, then she swears to obey the master in everything. At the same time, the hero understood that it was the cat who had recently shouted that she would turn him into a golden statue. The god of fire also knew that she did not have an evil aura, and it seemed that she really did not kill people. The smart guy immediately realized that this cat could be taken to his new home, because they just needed a guard dog. Indignant, the cat began to explain that she was a kitty, and not a stinking dog. Starting from today, he will be her owner, and since she is a cat, the guy is going to call her Cats. The cat was truly pine, and also understood that if she was close to such a strong deity, then it was quite possible that in the future she would be able to see much more treasures. And the treasures that the greedy cat has collected will need to be returned to their rightful owners. That would be right, but there are a lot of them, so taking it all at once will be another problem. Unexpectedly, the cat took out a ring, what is called shumi. Inanimate things can be placed in it, and the stronger its owner, the more things can be put in it. This is the most expensive treasure, and she gives it to her owner. After thanking the cat, the guy immediately put the ring on. Having put it on the ring, he immediately began to think that it would be cool if after university he didn't find a job, he would simply open his own transportation company. The divine spirits were shocked by such words, and did not understand whether he was really saying this in all seriousness. At that same second, a very loud explosion was heard nearby. It turned out that this is a mountain that was holding on to the spiritual power of a greedy cat, but today she spent too much of it, so she is afraid that this mountain will not last long. Because of this, a gigantic explosion occurred, and the volcano began its true eruption. After the explosion, the hero was unconscious, and he felt unbearable pain. But someone decided to help him, and the caring one wanted to take him to the hospital. Some time later, events continued to occur in the hospital. As it turned out, the savior was Xiaoqing, who wanted to know how he was doing and how he was feeling. The guy had strange feelings all this time, because he remembered exactly how he was buried under the mountain, so he decided to ask what his girlfriend was doing here. Last night, when she was out for a night run, she heard a loud crash, and when she followed the noise, she found him lying there under a pile of stones, so she immediately called an ambulance. It was really surprising that the girl decided to run at night to the mountains themselves. Tomorrow their club was going to organize a climb up the mountain, so she decided to run there and look at that same mountain. Although it was a little suspicious, Zhu Anhao still thanked his friend, because if it weren't for her, he would have died long ago. Xiaoqing accepted the gratitude and said that she did this because they had been friends since childhood. At that same second, the guy felt the same feeling that he had earlier. And he began to hug the girl, because he experienced that same feeling in his dream. Meanwhile, visitors had already come to the guy who wanted to know how he was feeling. Walking into the room, they saw the hero hugging his girlfriend, and were amazed by what they saw. Everything looked different from what it looked like. Xiaoqing is his childhood friend, and he wouldn't take advantage of her kindness. Even the girls said that Anhao would never like a tomboy like her. The girls immediately began to look at their new friend, because with such a face you just need to add a little makeup, and she will become simply irresistible, and her figure is also great, because there is not a hint of fat. The hero could not believe what he saw and asked if they really came here to visit him. But in reality this was not the case. Simo came here to remind them that they had a joint training tomorrow, so they shouldn't forget about it. Bai Fanhua also came to offer one task with a good reward, which turned up for her, which is why she wanted Zhu Anhao to help deal with it. Simo did not agree with this. After all, if they violate the training schedule, then she will completely lose control over her guardian spirit. Bai Fanhua immediately asked who the girl is related to Zhu Anhao, that he needs to constantly hang around with her. Listening to this whole conversation, Xiaoqing wanted to know what kind of training the girls were talking about. The hero immediately began to make excuses that they didn't know what they were talking about, and it was all nonsense. Watching the hero closely, the two ladies wanted to know who the hero still wanted to go with. Bai Fanhua hinted that if he went with her, then a lot of pleasures awaited him. Realizing that the guy was in a hopeless situation, he understood that no matter who he chose, the other would still be offended, and this was a problem. Then he decided to whisper in Xiaoqing's ear that it was time to use their brotherly oath. And as if nothing had happened, the guy said that he had promised to go with her to her club's event. They signed up for the same group, and if they didn't go, they would definitely be in trouble. If so, Simo decided not to insist so as not to let his girlfriend down, but next time he shouldn't even think about skipping their training. Meanwhile, Bai Fanhua decided to come closer to Xiaoqing, and called her cutie, after which she suggested that they be friends and leave this idiot here, and go together and have a cup of coffee. Thus, all the girls began to leave the hero, and he was amazed at this outcome of events. At the end, even one of the girls stuck her tongue out at him, thereby hinting that no one needed him. Feeling strong indignation, the guy was amazed at this outcome of events. Even the god of fire teased him, because since he appeared, beauties began to constantly revolve around the hero, and he should not be thanked for such help. Deciding to figure it out, the guy still wanted to find out from Jerome what happened yesterday, because he only remembered how they were buried under rubble and mountains, but God didn't know either. After the guy lost consciousness, he immediately fell asleep and now I just woke up now. Suddenly, the greedy cat said that they were saved by a descendant of some spirit. Fortunately, Kotya was also fine. After the cave collapsed, she felt someone else's spiritual chi. Only when she dug her way through, they were already taken somewhere. Perhaps the descendant of the spirit was Xiaoqing, but Jerome denied this, because if everything was as simple as they say, then he would immediately sense the presence of the guardian spirit in her. The guy immediately realized that God could be wrong, because he did not feel the presence of a guardian spirit in other people, but he denied, because ancient gods like him should not be put on a par with simple spirits. Due to the fact that nothing could be found out, the guy realized that he should drop this question about the identity of the one who saved them, and it would be better to find out where the ghost girl went, because she must be hiding somewhere near that mountain. Suddenly, unknown steam began to be heard from the ring. It was a ghost girl who was very happy because she was finally able to find her spiritual vessel. Seeing this item, the guy immediately thought that her vessel was just an ordinary card, but this was not so, because it was a jade anuroba. And they will know that Yang Guifei herself used her. She was one of the 4 beauties of China and a Tang concubine. Meanwhile, the nurses heard that the patient was talking to himself all the time, and wanted to see if he would need to be immediately sent to a psychologist in the future. Some time later, events continued to occur near the gorge. The hero talked on the phone and agreed to go up the mountain with the girl. Suddenly, someone approached him nearby and drew his attention. Seeing who addressed him, the guy was simply dumbfounded. It was Xiaoqing, yesterday's sister by Manhwa, took her to get hair extensions, and said that she wanted to help her change her image. Even the hero felt very embarrassed, because he believed that the girl had become much nicer. At the same time, the man announced that today the sports club is organizing a group climb up the mountain. According to the rules, it is necessary to unite in groups of 3 people, and you cannot leave the route. The one who gets to the top of the mountain first will be the winner. Realizing that there were only 2 of them, they began to look for a way to find a third person. Suddenly, someone approached them and asked if they had a third person they could take on the team. As it turned out, it was the captain of the boxing club, whom they had previously met, and he wanted to be on their team. Although Simo didn't immediately remember him, she later guessed who this guy was. After all, he turned out to be the guy whom Zhu Anhao knocked out with one blow. This was really so, because there was enough strength in this blow, and it can still be felt. The hero immediately took this as a desire for revenge, and if the captain of the boxing club wants revenge, then he will accept the challenge without any problems. In fact, he didn't want this, because he understood that he was not a rival for such a strong fighter, and last time he went too far, so they can form a group together, and after that, let all their differences remain in the past. All this time, listening to this guy, the hero could not believe his words, because he believed that this guy was speaking in all seriousness, because you couldn't tell from his appearance that he was trying to deceive him. The god of fire decided to support him, and said that he should agree with this guy. In any case, he can't do anything to Zhu Anhao. After all, this guy is just an ordinary person. Thus, the hero invited him to the group. With such a composition they will definitely be able to take first place, said the captain of the boxing team. Simo was happy with this outcome of events, and really wanted to get first place in this competition. All this time, the guys looked at her and admired how energetic she was. It was this trait that endeared her to people the most. Previously, Zhu Anhao always thought of Simo as some kind of tomboy, but she turns out to be actually quite a beauty. And she also has other qualities that also make you gradually begin to fall in love with her, because the hero has clearly never experienced this before.